January, there's been a little bit of a wake-up call across Europe. And what's encouraging is that on the policy level in Brussels, but also in many of the countries, member states, UK, there is now a sense of urgency that we need to increase the pace. We need to put more money to work. We need to be bolder as a region. And we need to think about sovereignty in terms of technology, that we cannot rely on US and China technologies all the time. You know, we have had it in a way easy because of our tech ecosystem came a bit later. We could rely on a lot of infrastructure, primarily from US and actually from China as well, of course, in telecom. And we could build on top of that, and that's been great because we always thought it's all, you know, one market. And we never had needed to build, you know, whatever operating systems or cloud services and these kind of things, but we could if we really wanted to. But I think I don't see it really happening, but what I do see happening now is it's entrepreneurs building, you know, energy companies. There's several really exciting fusion companies. Absolutely. In Europe. There are some really interesting companies, yeah, for sure, in climate. But we really need to double down. We need to double down on these deep tech companies, which require a lot of more funding. We also need to double down on backing our winners. And so we really can play a significant role. I think then you have, of course, because of the war, there's many founders who are now building defense companies, and they do it purely out of mission because they think it's important to protect ourselves, to save life. And it's really encouraging to see that, and those, I mean, I haven't met all of them. I met many founders building defense companies, and I can tell you their moral compass is at the right place. They're doing it purely to protect, you know, ourselves, and I think that's like really honorable of them to do. And I think that's also important that we continue to support those founders.
I absolutely endorse that. I would like to take you up one part of this equation, which I need to be very honest about. You know, I come from a conventional finance background at large funds. And actually, I need to be honest and say that I think a lot of the difficulty we face now could simply be altered by people in traditional finance opening their mind to the rewards out there. And instead we struggle in almost every country, for very different reasons, for the willingness to invest in risk and venture capital.
Yeah. Well, James, you were probably the trailblazer in that more traditional finance industry to took a lot of long-term bets, and I think a lot of investors from traditional institutions and could learn from your example. I think we're really underfunded here in Europe, so that while we're catching up with on the early stage funding. But a company in Europe that raised a first kind of venture capital round, maybe like a seed round, they're half as likely to raise a 15 million euro round as a US counterparty. And the later stage you are, the less capital we have in Europe. Now, the reality is that the most successful European companies have absolutely no problem raising money from US investors. But I think we need to look at this also from a regional perspective, because this is GDP growth we're talking about. And I think there's like trillions of GDP at stake in the future that we're going to miss out in Europe if we don't, if the European institutions, and I'm talking about the pension funds, the insurance companies, don't get their act together and start investing into European tech companies, because that's where value is being created. Instead of all that value going to to foreign investors. And the pension funds in Europe are investing 0.007% of their investments into European tech. So then if they just shifted that to the same level as some of the leading US pension funds, we will release 200 billion euros in the next 10 years. And that would really be a game changer.
It's a solvable problem in that
It is,
way,
yes.
isn't it? I mean, we need to get on pushing on with trying to. You mentioned healthcare earlier. This is one that preoccupies me because I think, so much money has gone on from all our societies, yet the outcomes appear to be getting worse. Do you see potential breakthroughs here, and are there enough attempts at that in Europe?
Yes, I mean, there are several. And I think, first of all, we have some very successful pharma companies in Europe, so it's always a good start. And what is exciting is companies using AI, machine learning, different types of AIs to do drug discovery, for example. And you can really prove now that you can time and money to come to a clinical trial can be reduced magnitudes by using machine learning AI. So that's kind of is already happening, not yet at scale, but it's happening. I think the best is still ahead of us. Quantum computing, more advanced AI, simulations, synthetic data, all of those things, combination of these will mean that more and more of those breakthroughs in treatments are actually ahead of us. So I think if you take a 10-year horizon, I think you're going to see some very interesting things. Then, of course, you have preventive healthcare, which is also exciting. You have companies like Neko Health, that Daniel Ek started, which is like bringing it to making it accessible and cheap for as many people as possible to do preventive checks.
You're obviously a very practical man, but I can't stop myself asking you as late question. Do you have a dream out there that you would really like to see accomplished in the next decade?
A what?
A dream.
Well, I think for me the dream would be the climate, right? If we don't fix the climate, I know where future generations is going to have a pretty bad time. So that's something that we need to bend that curve.
Yep.
And we're not going to meet, the Paris Agreement is out the window already. Many of the planetary boundaries are now in the danger zone. So we might get into these tipping points when we don't know what's going to happen. So that's critical. Unfortunately, because of all the other things going on in the world, whether they are financial crises, war, geopolitical instability, we forgot about the climate. And the climate crisis is still there, whether we talk about it or not. And that's something I really hope that entrepreneurship and technology and innovation have an impact on.
Well, you timed that to answer exactly at 0.0, but I think it's absolutely a reminder, and thank you so much for your thoughts and contributions.
Yeah. Well, thank you, James.
Thank you very much for this conversation. And you mentioned sovereignty, so that's a good point, because I think the next speaker will talk about it, because we're going to focus now on a new specific industry, which is space. A few startups have been emerging lately. One of them is, maybe you know it, is the Exploration Company. It is based in France and in Germany. And a few months ago, it closed a 150 million round, the largest round in European space tech. And the majority of the investors were Europeans. So I'm very pleased to welcome on stage one of the founders who will explain what it takes to build world-class deep tech companies from Europe, why space sovereignty matters for the continent's future, and how our vision of democratizing space exploration could position Europe as the leader in the next era of human space exploration. So I am pleased to welcome on stage Helene Huby, co-founder of the Exploration Company.
Buongiorno. Mi piacerebbe molto intuino alla Italian Space Week essere. I will continue in English, don't worry, for the ones who are not Italians. I first would like to talk a little bit about space and why space matters. Then I will share a little bit about our journey. We've been very lucky with the exploration company. Indeed, we are 4 years old and we are the fastest growing space startup in Europe, so I'd like to share a bit about how we've been able to scale. And last but not least, I'd like to end on a positive note. What are the opportunities that we have here in Europe to build global leaders with European roots? So why does space matter? 3 main reasons. Number one, it's a huge market. And perhaps you don't know, but in the next 5 years, the space market is going to reach approximately 1.5 trillion, which is the size of the aeronautic and also flying market, so aviation market. So it's big, it's big. And the main driver of this huge market is telecommunication. I believe there will be in the next 3 to 4 years a tipping point when the cost of refurbishing and improving the telecommunication infrastructure in space will become cheaper than the cost of refurbishing and improving the telecommunication infrastructure on Earth. And you can imagine that when this tipping point is reached, space communication-based infrastructure is going to serve the majority of the communication needs on Earth. And that's one of the reasons why the valuation of SpaceX is so high right now. So, big market. Number two, space is also very, very, very useful for our basic needs. And basic needs mean climate. We cannot understand what is happening on Earth without space imagery. And if we don't understand, we don't know how to improve the situation with climate. It's also much more precise. I'll give you a few examples. If you're in agriculture in India and you want to optimize the use of fertilizers, the use of water, you want to use as much as possible space imagery. And to give a precise example, one startup in India, Satsur, is providing now with an app millions of farmers so that they can optimize the use of water fertilizers. Another example, you're in Africa and you want to sell yogurts to the next market. It's very important for you to understand approximately how many people will be there so that you package correctly how many yogurts you're going to take with you, because sometimes, let's say, the transportation chain with fridge are not optimal. And for that, again, space imagery is going to give you roughly, approximately, how much yogurt you're going to bring to the next market, and it's going to enable you basically to optimize your fleet of trucks so that you can deliver to the right market the right number of yogurts. So not only you serve better your client, but also you delete, you destroy, waste less resources, plus you optimize your trajects, right? So it's better also for the climate. So this is just a few examples how space is useful in, I would say, the daily life. Don't speaking about the positioning, of course, but it's also very, very critical for defense. We need space imagery to understand what is happening right now in Russia, for example. And believe it or not, but right now in Europe, we have no sovereign capacity to understand what is happening every, let's say, 5 to 10 minutes in Russia. We are completely dependent from American imagery. For communication, when you are in a fighter jet, for example, and you need to communicate, all this communication must be fully secured, encrypted, and of course you're using space. And last but not least, positioning. This is very important for drones. More than the majority of the American Air Force right now is drones. So if a country hacks GPS, for example, it means that the majority of the Air Force potentially, is grounded. And it has happened already that some planes couldn't actually land at the right place because they couldn't get any more the GPS signals and they couldn't position themselves anymore. So this is real, and actually China and Russia are much better than we are, and also that, to my knowledge, the Americans are regarding the spoofing, right? So regarding basically jamming signals and diverting planes. So space is absolutely critical for defense. We've all seen that with the start of the war in Ukraine. And we are quite weak right now in Europe regarding this space-based infrastructure. And last but not least, the third reason why space is so important, because it speaks to us as human. It's inspiration. Like why do you go to theater? Why do you go to concerts? Why do you watch sports? Or do you play sports? It's because we are humans. And when we look at space, it speaks to our spiritual mind. It speaks to our scientific minds, because we want to understand, for example, the science of universe. We want to understand the laws of gravitation of the planet, the Kepler laws, for example. It speaks to our engineering mind, because we want to build stuff to go there. And it speaks also to our collaborative mind, because anything we build in space, can be a satellite, can be a rocket, can be a spaceship, as we are building at the Exploration Company. Everything we build for space is very, very difficult, and it's a result of a combination of talent. It's like building a human body, basically. And it means everyone in the human chain building a spacecraft has a huge responsibility. One blue collar not using the right screw, and for example changing the material of the screw, even if this is exactly the same size, may be the cause for a complete explosion of the spacecraft. So in the way we build a space vehicle is exactly the way we would build a human body, for example. We are each of us highly dependent. Small mistake made by one person can have huge consequences. And it creates a wonderful mindset of engineers working together. So these are the three reasons why space is very important. Huge market, huge opportunity. We need to be able to grasp part of this market as Europeans. It's critical for optimizing our activities on Earth, for climate change, but also critical for defense. And it's just part of who we are. And because it's part of who we are, this is why we named the Exploration Company the Exploration Company, right? Because this is part of who we are. We are, as humans, we are explorers. Since the very, very beginning of humanity, we've been exploring. We've been exploring the Earth, we've been exploring through seas, we've been exploring through airs, and now comes the time when we are exploring through space. This is the century when that's going to happen, and this is very, very exciting, and I want us, Europeans, of course, to be part of this huge exploration. So, a little bit about the Exploration Company now. We are 4 years old. We are about 400 people. We are based in, we started being based in Germany and France, so I started a company almost the same day between Germany and France, and because I'm French, I decided to have the headquarters in Germany. We opened in Italy 1 year and a half ago, and we've been opening also in the US, Los Angeles and Houston, and we have opened this year in the UAE, in Dubai. What are we doing? We are building space vehicles. And we start, the first vehicle is actually a spaceship, a space capsule, the first ever space capsule being built in Europe, that in 2028 is going to go to the space station up there, is going to dock, so to be, attached to the space station to bring cargo and then to fly back. And then we're going to reuse step by step these vehicles. We need a bit more time to carry humans because it's a huge endeavor, but we will get there. And of course, after the capsule comes the rocket, and after the rockets comes the lunar lander. And we build these space vehicles in a very, very special manner. I've been inspired by the way the European founders, the European fathers, they built Europe. Because let's believe it or not, we are a unique fact in history. We've been fighting, we've been in wars for centuries. And after the Second World War, some people said, let's make sure we don't do that again. And they decided to share critical technologies between countries, coal and steel, basically the raw material to make weapons. And this is how the European Union started. And this is at the core of the European Union. And this mission, basically, of sharing critical technologies so that we can live in peace and we can collaborate more, this is the mission of the Exploration Company, inspired by the European history. So our mission is to build space vehicles across nations to foster collaboration and peace in space. Because space is part of our future as humans, and we have a choice. We can build this future in a confrontational manner, or we can build this future in a collaborative manner. And this is this last path, collaborative manner, peaceful manner, that we select. And of course, we're not naive, right? We know that space is already the battleground. But guess what? The technologies we are developing with the space capsule not only are a way to collaborate, and as a matter of fact, we are building this space capsule between France, Germany, Italy, and the US. Right now, as we speak, we are the first ever European company having signed a Space Act agreement with NASA. We will be certified both by NASA and the European Space Agency. And I've already sent 2 capsules to space. So this is very real. This collaboration I'm talking about is very, very real. And for the lunar lander, as another example, we are building our lunar lander together with the UAE. And if everything goes well, by the end of the decade, we will bring for the first time the European continent and the Arabic continent together to the lunar surface. So that collaboration is real. At the same time, while developing these technologies, while enabling collaborations, we are protecting the European democracies thanks to our technologies. I'll take 2 examples. A space capsule must re-enter. Okay, if you're carrying humans up there, you need to bring these people back, as simple as that. And when you re-enter, it's a little bit warm. It's right kind of 2,000 degrees, so you don't want to burn, right? And because you don't want to burn, we are producing what is called thermal protection to make sure that the capsule doesn't burn. So far, Europe had only one source of thermal protection for hypersonic re-entries, which, as you can imagine, is very important for hypersonic airplanes and hypersonic missiles. Since 1 month, Europe has a second source of hypersonic thermal protection. Our factory, one of our factories, actually based in Bordeaux, which has industrialized the German technology. And this is a critical defense technology that we are building for a space capsule, which is peaceful. At the same time, we will be selling this thermal protection to companies which are producing hypersonic missiles, defending Europe and our citizens. Another example, if we go to a station, there is one thing we must never do. We must never collide with the space station, okay? Because imagine if we collide with the space station, we will create what is called catastrophic hazard. Basically, we are putting the life of the astronauts in danger, if not more. So to make sure we never collide with a station, we are what is called 3 failure tolerance. I'm not going to enter into the details, but our design is very, very safe, and this is what NASA is going to certify, that never, ever, whatever happens, we'll never collide with the space station. Now, let's imagine you have a satellite up there, and this is the reality. This is no imagination. This is already happening as we speak. Spy satellite, hacking satellite, spoofing satellite, whatsoever. The first thing you want to understand is, what is this satellite doing exactly? Who could have built this satellite? So you want to fly around. And then if you want to do something, if you want to attack the satellite, if you want or to defend yourself or to destroy a threat for your infrastructure, you have the same problem. You must never collide with the satellite. So you see another example where our critical technology we are developing to go to space station is actually already being used to perform military missions. So these were some examples about basically where we are and how we serve the European landscape. I'd like to speak a little bit about the lessons learned on the journey, and then I will conclude. I am out of time, right? So perhaps 3 main lessons learned and 3 assets for Europe. Lessons learned number 1, people. Everything we do is because we have great people. And we've been spending huge amount of time recruiting the right talent, and this is still like probably 35% of my time as a CEO to make sure we have the right people inside the company. Number 2, and this is even more as important as the people, is the mission. You've heard our mission is to build space vehicles across nations to foster collaboration and peace. companies are here to transform the world for the better. And we can raise a huge amount of money having a real mission which is beneficial to the world. And this is how we attract the best talent, and this is how we motivate people when hard time comes. Because when hard time comes, people need to understand why they are moving their ass, why they are working like crazy. And this why is the mission. This is how we attract and keep the best people. And last but not least, for very deep tech startups as we are, building a space capsule costs $500 million, roughly speaking. We started with very, very small step. And as soon as possible, we found the right balance between government contract and private contract. We signed 800 million euro of contract with private American space stations who want more competition, who do not want to be dependent only from SpaceX. At the same time, we convinced the European government to create a space capsule program. For the first time, it was an open competition between corporations like Airbus, Thales, OHB, and small startups like us. And we won, ranked #1, and this gave a lot of trust to the investors because they could see that in case of delays, which sometimes happens in space, in case of overruns of cost, we would be backed by the governments because the infrastructure is developing is a critical and strategic infrastructure also for Europe. So with this, I will conclude on a note of hope. Building a company in Europe is not always easy because we have to speak to several governments. We have to create a unifying dream for all these governments. But it's worth it. We have a huge cost advantage because one aerospace engineer in Europe is costing 1/3 of an American aerospace engineer. We have a huge international advantage. We've been partnering with UAE. I hope we'll partner tomorrow with India and with Australia. And we can do that in a much easier manner than if we would be Americans. And we have this experience of collaboration that we can bring to the world. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Helene, for this inspiring keynote. Thank you. Now let's move to a session entitled The Board Dilemma, How European Funders Can Navigate Governance Without Losing Control. So a board can make or break a startup, and European funders often struggle with governance structure inherited from different ecosystems. So we're going to witness a conversation between an investor who recently wrote about the silent startup killer of bad governance and a seasoned board member who's seen both sides, from building global companies to guiding the next generation of European founders. So I'm very happy to welcome on stage Diego Piacentini and Jean de la Rochebrochard.
Wow. They still don't know what we're going to say. They're applauding. It's mainly for you. So, first of all, I need to say, I need to disclaim that Jean is, kind of a hero for Vento because, as I mentioned yesterday, we blatantly copied the Kima Ventures model.
Thank you.
And when Kima Ventures started?
In 2010.
2010. So you started like 10 years before us. You have 10 years,
Yeah.
but we're going to come after you. I still remember when you told me this model makes us finance, invest into 2 startups a week. Did I say that correctly?
That's correct, yes.
So we are at 1. So we're filling the gap. We're getting there. All right, Jean. Many founders, especially the early founders, see the board as a formality and as a necessary evil. The answer is obviously not, don't think this way, because we know that, but why? And what is the main mistake when founders look at the board in this way?
When the thing is that a board is never a formality. Usually you have it in your shareholder agreement, so you think it's something easy. But it's the founder's job to grow into governance. But at first, your job is to learn how to be a CEO, how to execute, how to operate. And I'm going to give you one precise example. It's actually the one who made me write this piece about board being a silent killer. I had this founder. She came to me about one of her investors. He was receiving the quarterly updates, but he was not happy with them. He wanted more. And so he said to her, we need to organize proper quarterly board meetings. And she told me, you know, it's just 2-3 hours a quarter, doesn't look that complicated, that engaging, why not? And I told her, big, big mistake. Because a month before the board meeting, you're going to try to stress out. You're going to start to stress out. You're going to prepare for the board. And then you're going to come there, and it's going to look more like a courtroom than, you know, a field where you exchange ideas and then you grow into something. And then for another month, you're going to second guess everything you do. Because they basically disagree with half you're doing. Because you're creating, and of course there are doubts, it's okay. So out of the 3 months between each board meetings, you're going to lose 2/3 of your time stressing about, you know, providing this kind of comfort against the fear of your investors. And that's why you should never start with a board. You start by becoming a CEO, and you grow into governance as time passes.
And it's interesting that board preparation, you mentioned that, so I'm going to go directly to this question. There's all the board I'm in, the board at Amazon before, one of the most effective ways to prepare the board was the pre-read material. At Amazon, we killed PowerPoints.
Which is good.
And believe me, PowerPoints are bad board presentation style. At DoorDash, at other companies, it's a narrative. And how important is the pre-read, besides informing the board?
I think that if you want a good image, a pre-read is like an X-ray provided by the founder, while the presentation is more like an Instagram filters, okay, where you have everything about the business. But if you come to the board and you don't know all the things about the business, you actually don't have, you know, your place at that board. The pre-read provides both, you know, a reflection from the founder or where they stand and perspective. It's not as flat, boring, streamlined, prepared. You know, the goal of a presentation is to convince. The goal of a pre-read is to prepare. And this is why you absolutely need that. And by the time...
It's not a pitch.
It's not a pitch. The pre-read is where you accept your vulnerability as a CEO. And actually, vulnerability is probably the first thing that you expect from each one of the board members.
And it's not a pitch. It's interesting because you're maybe talking to the same people that are your investors, which obviously are in a different receiving mode of the information. And you need to make sure that it's not about convincing someone, as you just said, but it's explaining to someone how the things are going.
Yeah, and you want also to avoid this sense of collusion. You know, I like to say that collusion is a nice, polite dinner on the Titanic, and cohesion is when the team is at the front fighting against the iceberg ahead of us. And you want the board, at the end of any board meeting, you need to think about how you felt. If you felt like you were united in cohesion, but not in collusion, you're in a good spot. But if you felt like nothing really came out from constructive conflicts, you should probably think about, you know, try again.
I hope everybody heard this. It's like a dinner on the Titanic the evening before the crash.
Yeah.
I mean, if I look at the companies that I've invested in and have failed, in at least 2 cases, the board was complacent. And the board should have jumped into challenging the CEO, avoiding how did you call it? Collusion?
Collusion, yeah.
And being way more straightforward towards the CEO. One other thing that I'm expecting, and I'd like to hear your experience in that case, is the board member is not just to hear from the CEO, but from the management. And I think being exposed to the management is key?
To be exposed to the management is to be exposed to what's inside the company. And just to have one view from the CEO is full of limitations, for sure. And, I'm thinking about, those companies that tend to fail because the board didn't act on time. Sometimes to fire the CEO, but sometimes just to empower the CEO correctly. I like to say that the board is like, it's to be an archaeologist, not to be an interior designer. You're supposed to dig under the rock, and until you actually dig everything out, you're not there. We're not here to argue about the wallpaper. We're here to discover the truth. And so often we talk about people, about data, and probably those are the two most fundamental elements of a company. And we just, wait for the answer from the CEO, and then we leave the room happy with the answers. Actually, you should dig further. And until you dig further and really sense that you master the subject as a board member, you should keep addressing the subject. And I think we tend to forget about that and just, let it go.
Totally. And this goes into another point that you made very, very clear. I'm actually going to read it because I think it's very important. A functional board does not just happen by chance. It requires structure. You need to insist on clear rules of engagement.
Yeah, the clear rules of engagement. It comes from this book that I like, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, where it all starts with vulnerability. The issue that we have during a board meeting sometimes is that, people who already succeeded in some ways, good investors, good operators, they come with a background, and where their willingness to kind of, basically fight for their room at the board. And it's not about that. First, it's about accepting their vulnerability and coming with an open mind and the fact that you trust the other board members. Once you trust the others, you can go into the constructive conflict. And constructive conflict gets to a point that you know very well at Amazon, where you can finally disagree and commit. And this sense of disagree and commit, and you told me about, one of your board one day where you were arguing, and at some point you asked the person, I don't understand with your answer. Did you actually agree or disagree with me? We need to get to a point.
Sometimes the answers are so polished, and there is no room for excessive politeness.
Yeah.
If you understand what I mean.
And don't take nothing. Nothing's personal. We all have the same objectives. We only win if the company wins. And so forget about your ego and everything. Just get there to make this functional.
Yeah, I think that management of conflicts, and this is true also within the management team, not just within the board and between the board and the management. When the board meetings are going too well and everything seems like going in the right direction and everything, I think important is to throw occasionally something like, okay, everything seems to be going fine, but what did you actually disagree on? It's impossible that you and your management team agreed on everything. And so many times, that conversation brings to topics that were not discussed.
Yeah, and it comes down also to the time where you think about something that is an impression, and this impression keeps coming back, at every board meeting. And this is this kind of pattern of repeat failure, And this is one of the things that kill companies, those patterns of repeat failures. And as a board member, you always try to address those issues to kill them once and for all. And it's very hard to do that.
Yeah. Another interesting question that a lot of startups have, startup at least Series A, Series B, you start evolving, you start getting enough funding, is when it's time to bring in operators from the business and to start dropping out some investors.
Yeah, well, I think you should start dropping out some investors, every time, because we're too many in the room all the time. But let's not address this topic right now. No, the thing is that, think of a football team. Sometimes a coach has never been a player. He's always been a coach, and he's great at that. And sometimes the players could never be a coach. So a coach can be a player the other way around or not. And so you need both perspectives, because the operators have been hands down into execution. They can help you with the, the tactics and how to get things done. While the investors, I think we have this kind of, view from the outside, higher view, with the patterns of all the companies that we've backed, everything that we've seen, and it's more strategic. And so if you can mix the tactical ability of an operator with the strategic ability of an investor together, that's great. It could be the best board meeting ever.
Yeah, that's very important because I've noticed this. I'm actually in one board where I'm the only, I'm very, very small investors, but I'm there for other reasons. And the type of questions from some of the investors, there are long-term oriented investors, and we are symmetric. But the asymmetry starts when it's obvious that the questions are more towards, when is the exit strategy happen? We've been, here for 5 years, and versus, what are the problems with the business? Where are the inputs you want to work on? Which is fine to obviously have a solicitation to drive for profitability, because exit and profitability obviously go together, which is great. But profitability for exit might create some distortions.
Agree. It's how do you kill everyone's own agenda to focus on the company's goal. Of course, the company's goal is to become profitable, to become big enough to be meaningful, even not to be acquired, but to acquire some other players, But sometimes I think there's this fear. You come in the room with your fear. Your fear because you're not operating the business. So, it's like a breakup or something, or a relationship. You imagine all those things in your head until you actually come in and understand what's really happening. That's why your take on bringing the management inside the boardroom for them to explain what they're doing matters, because it's a way for the investors to actually understand how the company operates for real, and not to make them mind about it, imagine, fantasize, and everything.
There is a great French movie that just won the Academy Award a couple years ago. I think it was called The Anatomy of a Fall in English. So let's talk about the anatomy of a failure. Talk us about some of the failures you have witnessed.
Well, I think it's really...
just company going under that you were on the board of.
Yeah, I had this company in which that had raised about 200 million euros. And
200 million euros.
Yeah, and it didn't go bust. Of course, it was just acquired for a meaningless amount. But I think it's hard because the first thing as a board member after this, it goes bust, it's you realize everything that you could have done. And then you realize our governance is what we call an organ. And then it pops up, a fucking organ. Like you leave or you die because of an organ. And the company died, of course, because of mismanagement and everything. But the board as an organ could have saved it.
But wasn't the mismanagement clear? Was it hidden? You guys were not paying enough attention? What was it?
I think the first thing is that someone addresses a subject, we get an answer, and we just leave the room happy with the answer without second guessing whether it's accurate or not. And so, for instance, you have a company with contracts and revenues and everything. Does anyone look at the contract? The contracts are the assets. It's like the subprimes. In 2008, you were buying, subprimes and stuff, and you were happy with that because everybody was telling you that it's high rated. But if you look deep down within the assets, it's gold mixed with shit. And it's the same in a company. Sometimes they tell you something, and you're like, well, maybe, show me the number, show me the contract, show me the asset from which you extracted that answer. And you want to see that. Xavier Niel, the founder of Kima Venture and Iliad and all those telco companies, what he likes to do sometimes, he goes in a company and he opens the book of invoices and everything, and he looks at all the spendings. And then, some things pop up all the time. And as a board member, sometimes you need to basically build trust and rapport with the founder so that you can do that. You can tell him or tell her, I'm going to go inside your company for a day or two or a week. I'm going to look inside. It's not against you. It's just because if I don't do that, and we fail, it's my responsibility. And we need to fight against that.
One of the things that I've noticed in the board of the, but that's also true when they make presentation to fundraise, is the amazing confusion you get between revenue, ARR, booking. It gives, if there is no lack of clarity in the way those numbers are reported, that's always a sign of something, which is at least confusion, which is bad. At worst, could be absolutely something else. So you mentioned 200 million.
Yes.
I think that one of the responsibilities, I mean, the larger the fundraising, the more scared the CEO and the board should be.
Right, and as Ray Dalio said, if you're not worried, you should be worried. And if you're worried, stop worrying. You know?
Yes. Well, I think on this note, we ended 40 seconds in advance, and I'd like to thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Diego. Thank you, Jean, for this conversation. So the European tech ecosystem has fundamentally shifted over the past 10 years. Now we have more talent, we have more capital, we have more successes, more unicorns. But what about the next 10 years? So 4 investors will join the stage to discuss what will fuel Europe's next decade of dominance, how a new generation of founders is changing the game, and why Europe is positioned to produce the world's next unicorn. So I'm very happy to welcome on stage Matt Miller, Georgia Stevenson, Ophelia Brown, Paul Murphy, and Tom McKenzie from Bloomberg.
So I have a bit of a news update. Georgia Stevenson from Index, unfortunately, is not here with us because, and I got this directly from the mouth of Paul Murphy, apparently there are protests that have affected the airport, so she hasn't been able to land in Turin. Is that correct?
That's
right,
what she said on
Okay,
text.
so unfortunately, Georgia Stevenson is not here. But around us, 3 individuals with just incredible experience in terms of investing in Europe, in the UK, in the US, of course, decades of experience, decades of making really smart, consequential bets. Paul Murphy, of course, general partner at Lightspeed, Ophelia of Blossom, of course, founder and managing partner, Ophelia Brown of Blossom Capital, and Matt Miller, of course, 20 years or so at Sequoia, 4 years at Avantic.
13.
13,
I'm not
sorry.
that old. I'm not
I just
that old.
extended your
13.
time.
You know, 13. You may be a lot older than I am. Just 13.
Just a mere 13 years. 4 years or so at Avantic, recently raised $400 million. And again, all of you with that deep experience. So with that background, I want to start with this question for you all. And maybe, Matt, I'll start with you. With your finger on the pulse, how would you characterize this moment in European tech?
I think we're in this incredible moment where we have the best slate of companies and opportunities we've ever had. And we're in an evolution. Tech is this series of cycles. And we had the SaaS cycle, we had the mobile cycle. We're now at the beginning of the AI cycle. And I think Europe is best positioned to play in the AI cycle than it's been in any of the past cycles because of the quality of the education that we have here and the quality of the talent that we have in this ecosystem. And we see this wave of really interesting companies, whether it be 11 Labs in London or Synthesia, or whether it be Mistral, or whether it be Lovable. We see this whole slate of really interesting rising companies here taking advantage of this wave. And I think it's a great moment for us to lean into it, take advantage of it, and use it to go make our dent in the world.
In this cycle, Europe is best positioned. Ophelia, do you agree with that?
I would agree that we're in our strongest moment right now. I think to add to Matt's point, obviously, success compounds. So if you look at the history of European tech, we're younger than the Valley. There's no argument to that. But success compounds. And so if you look over the last decade and the amount of companies that have gone public or the number of unicorns or companies to reach 100 million plus ARR, we're definitely on a growth path. And so now there are credible examples, especially to young talent starting today who want to go out to build companies, who know if they take risk and they really go for it and they hire the right teams, that it's possible to build generational, long, enduring companies.
And Paul, you've backed Mistral. You're an early backer of Mistral, really the only large language model, the only lab, of course, that Europe really has. Do those sentiments chime with you? And then maybe we can think about the importance of that foundational AI technology for Europe.
Yeah, definitely. I actually think, the way I would characterize it right now is it feels like Europe is waking up. And it's not to say that Europe was asleep, but there's this sort of newfound confidence that I'm seeing with founders. When they're coming in, they're saying that, I can build this company and go all the way in Europe, and maybe even build for the European market or the global market. And in the kind of 8 years or so that I've been in Europe, I hadn't really seen that before, at least in the last few years, with very, very few exceptions. So I think, examples like Mistral are great, but we're also seeing it in the energy sector. We're seeing it in traditional software companies, even some consumer companies.
I wonder, Ophelia, did you agree? Are you seeing that mind shift change in Europe? And if so, what has catalyzed that? What has changed that?
I think definitely for anyone graduating from university today, I look back from when I graduated from university, startups were not really a thing. I started my venture career in 2012. Everyone looked to Silicon Valley. Now today, if you're starting a company, you're coming out of KTH in Stockholm, you want to join Lovable. If you're coming out of London, you want to join the next hottest AI startup, whether it be Synthesio or a 6-person team. So I think from the younger generation, there is so much excitement. And there's a talent to match, which is why it's so positive.
And Matt, you talked and you painted a really positive picture about where Europe sits in this next wave. Give us a sense then of when we can expect, if you agree with this, when we expect to have multiple $100 billion plus European tech companies, tech startups.
Yeah,
are we getting close to that?
We are on our way. We are on our way. We're still early in that, for sure, but we are on our way. We have the best pipeline of companies today that can get there. I think we have several in this AI wave that could crest 100 billion with time, but we're clearly a ways away from that still. But the foundation of it is very strong, and it looks like we will get there.
I want to draw on your experience in the US. When we look at these dollar numbers being committed, particularly around AI infrastructure, just in the last few weeks, commitments of $100 billion. NVIDIA's investment in OpenAI, and that's going to be spent on chips. We've had hundreds of billions committed to Stargate, possibly $500 billion in the United States. We've had 350 billion or more committed by the hyperscalers on data centers and infrastructure. Have we lost the infrastructure race when it comes to AI?
I think that we should think less about this infrastructure race and dollars into data centers in this country versus this country. I think we should think more about what is our competitive strength, which is our talent, and that most of these initiatives in the United States are being driven by a lot of people who come from European universities and European talent, and we should double down on making Europe a great place for European talent to stay and thrive. Infrastructure investments will come. We also had Jensen in the UK, committing to invest $2.5 billion in UK startups just a couple weeks ago. There's a lot of energy to do more of this in Europe. It's just that we need to build out more companies and more demand. US has this advantage of being one large singular market that we don't have in the US, and so that's going to, in and of itself, relate to the need for more infrastructure investments to serve it. And I think that the game that we need to play here in Europe is just doubling down on our talent, building great application companies that take advantage of AI, and investing in that and letting that build and create more foundation and opportunity for us, and not worry so much about which data center is going to go specifically where.
Paul, a big kind of appeal of Mistral, at least the pitch, has been this is sovereign AI for Europe. Do we need sovereign AI? Is that the right way to focus investments? And how realistic is it to have truly sovereign AI capabilities?
Well, I think, I'm obviously biased, but I think the world needs sovereign AI. I don't think it's a Europe thing. There are the largest market for Mistral outside of Europe is the US. And there are a number of US companies that are saying, we also care about our data. We want to sort of host things in a private cloud or on-prem. And the sovereignty is, of course, really important to partners across Asia as well. So I think that's important. I think the compute piece is also interesting because there are a subset of customers that are saying, I don't want to build out my own infrastructure, but I don't necessarily want to send it to another country. And so I think having that capability is important, but I agree with Matt, I don't think it's the most important thing. That said, I do think that right now what's happening is infrastructure means more than just data centers. It's also energy, and it's also a lot of software that is required to kind of build out that infrastructure. And I'm seeing more and more of that happen here within Europe.
And Ophelia, you touched on, and I know you think deeply about the talent piece as well. Have the politics and the tensions between Europe and the US, has that proved to be, is there an upside to that for Europe in terms of talent flows? Are you seeing any material impact in terms of talent coming back to Europe, moving to Europe, being convinced that staying here is more important?
I mean, I think it goes both ways, so I wonder whether in the end it nets out. But on the positive, yes, definitely changes to visa regulation and how immigrants are viewed in the US, and whether or not you can go and take your whole team over and relocate makes it harder for a European today. So a lot of founders are definitely questioning, should we just stay and build at home? On the flip side of that, there's obviously a lot of activity in San Francisco, and if you're building an AI native company and all of your customers are over in the West Coast, you have to ask why you're not spending time there. And so I think we're seeing a shift again where a lot of founders are saying, okay, well, maybe I start building here, but certainly I'm going to devote 80-90% of my time, especially if I'm a founder leading on sales or marketing over in the West Coast. And I think that's only a positive, actually. If European founders just build in isolation, I worry that that's a losing strategy, because obviously when you look at software companies from the past decade and going forward, I think most of your revenue is going to end up coming from the US. The US is just a larger buyer market, and it adopts software a lot quicker. So I think it's actually a positive if founders go and spend time over there.
And Matt, in your most recent fund, you're backed as well by a group that you call the legends. So former founders, former executives and investors all have scar tissue working with your portfolio companies. Where are we in terms of that repeat founder story in Europe? How important is it to have guys and girls who've been there, done that, and can work with those
I think it's an invaluable tool. And what we're trying to do with the legends is we have this community of people who are founders, builders, and investors who have seen the movie before in some way. And whether you're a repeat founder or you're a first-time founder, to make that experience accessible to you. And in Europe, I think part of the design of this was that in Europe, founders are spread out in so many different locations. How do we make sure they get connected to the right people in the right cities? Because the right person for you might be in Dublin, Ireland, and you might be building your business in Zurich. And yes, San Francisco is this amazing place you should go and spend time. But it's also nice to have some people on your time zone who have also had these global experiences. And so that's what the Legends Network hopes to achieve, and surround these founders with the right group of people who have done these things as their investors, and then people who have the opportunity to earn carry in the investment and be completely aligned with them in their success.
Do we have the operators in Europe? We have the founders. Do we have the operators who can actually execute the vision? Paul, maybe to you on that one.
I think
is that a bottleneck, I guess, for Europe?
It's a really good question, and I think the answer is different by function. There are certain functions that we have amazing operators here in Europe. There's other functions where, as Ophelia said, like the expertise, the years of experience, the reps, they happen in the US because the market's not as deep here, hasn't been around as long. So there are cases, some painful, where we have to import people or even set up teams in the US to support European companies.
And Ophelia, I've spoken to CEOs who've said to me that they can also leverage the relative cost advantage of European talent versus US talent. Put simply, we don't have to pay $100 million for an AI engineer in Europe. How real is that?
I mean, that's certainly very real. There is a cost advantage to building your product and eng team in Europe. There's no question about that. And if you can mix young talent with some more experienced talent in order to train them, which I think that's something Europe historically has been very good at, that's quite a powerful combination. And so, yes, we have much more talent loyalty. People stay for longer. the last decade has definitely taught employees about the value of options and the value of equity. And now people are actually making a lot of money out of that equity. If you look at Revolut's tender offer, for example, or our portfolio company Checkout had a tender offer last week. And so people are incentivized to stay, which is not what's happening at the Valley at the moment if you look at talent wars and how short people are staying in one company before going to another. So I certainly think that's an advantage of building in Europe.
Matt, where is the biggest funding bottleneck at this point for Europe?
I don't believe in funding bottlenecks.
Huh.
I think great companies have access to capital. And capital
Late
finds-
stage growth capital?
Yeah.
Can we find that in Europe, though?
People ask me this all the time. Is there a funding bottleneck?
Yeah.
Is you're going for the growth stage? Is that a funding bottleneck? Great companies have access to capital. And if you build a great company and you get aware of your business, and maybe there was a funding bottleneck in Europe a decade ago or 15 years ago before there were really so many great seed and early stage funds focusing in the different geographies. But I think Europe is pretty well now mapped. There are great investors at every stage here on the ground, here to help you. And I think that great companies find capital. And there's capital to grow them, whether it comes from here, whether it comes from the US, whether it comes from elsewhere in the world. I think that great companies find capital.
You guys agree with that?
So I'm a little bit of a yes, but. I think that there are certain companies where concentration of capital is vital. And I think it is still easier to concentrate capital in the US. I think you can still raise capital. You know, we're all here, we can sort of fund these companies. But there are cases where that's not enough, and actually you need more people. And in today's market, there are cases where you need tens of billions of dollars. And I think that concentration doesn't happen, not that it's easy in the US, but doesn't happen as easily yet in Europe.
Ophelia, we talked a lot about AI. We can continue to talk about that. But in terms of, if we set up a vision in 10 years' time, where can you really win across different segments and different sectors? What for you are the biggest opportunities that you're looking at right now in a kind of sector by sector space?
So I think historically Europe has always had an advantage in financial services and fintech, and obviously the next private company that's likely to surpass $100 billion is going to be Revolut.
Yeah.
And I think that would only compound. We have highly favorable regulation towards young startups in financial services. And so as Blossom, we're very bullish on that industry. And now we're seeing more excitement in newer industries like defense, where there's a very strong why now for new companies to exist and why that sector needs private capital in order to spur innovation.
Matt?
Yeah, so we're a startup as a fund, just brand new. So we're just focused on B2B AI. I think that is a huge opportunity of itself. And we're taking a little bit of tact in that we're building from London, but we're investing US and Europe. So half of our investments are in the US, half of our investments are here. But I think there's tremendous opportunity there. It's like every single functional area in the enterprise is being redefined by AI. Every single industry vertical is being redefined with AI as people find new ways to automate workflows with software. And I think we're well positioned to see many more great companies in that field come from here.
Lovable is in your portfolio.
Lovable is in our portfolio.
How big do Lovable get?
I mean, I think that the thing about Lovable that's exciting is like it just captures so much creativity. So when you sit down to Lovable and you write your prompt, you have no idea where it's going to take you. And it's opening up software development and application development to such a wide universe of people. So I think Lovable could be one of those companies that over time could crest 100 billion.
I was speaking to the CEO of Klarna about a week ago, Sebastian. He said he's getting in trouble with his wife because he helps put the kids down at the end of the night. They've just IPO'd, of course. And then he goes upstairs and just vibe codes on Lovable. And that's proving a tension point in his household because he's so addicted to it. Paul, which space do you think, when you look out 10 years, I mean, what are you most excited about now that's going to be transformative?
I mean, I was actually talking about this with Ophelia before we came down here. I mean, we are a large fund, but we're very early stage in our DNA.
Yeah.
So I would say we're very founder driven. I mean, we have kind of these documents, these theses, research we do in different areas, but ultimately I'll sit in a room. I sat in a room with a company a month and a half ago that was building a marketing tech solution. I never would have done a market map on marketing tech today, but I fell in love with the founders and what they're building, and so we're in business with them. But where are we spending the most time?
Yep.
We are, I would say, mostly enterprise infrastructure. That's kind of like the history of Lightspeed. So we're doing a lot of kind of infrastructure work, layers beneath the stack, security, reliability, observability, things like that.
Ophelia, have you noticed, we touched on this, but is there a cultural shift from founders that you're seeing as well? I think Paul mentioned it, in terms of the determination to stay the course and get to a point where these are truly scalable business in these different segments. Is there a cultural shift when it comes to how we celebrate success in Europe? I mean, what, are we seeing those kind of changes that many would say are necessary to create the necessary environment?
I think not only have we got much better about celebrating success, but we've also recognized that failure is an integral part of a startup ecosystem. And I think that was one of the challenges of Europe previously is, you know, it wasn't an acceptance to fail. But that's part of startup life. I mean, most startups will fail and you need to keep trying and trying again. And then when you really land on something, yes, I think because we've got so many great examples, you just mentioned Klarna just going public, you know, there's the older batch like Spotify, et cetera, where founders can say, if you really stay the course, there's a meaningful outcome to go for. And I can bring people on my journey. I mean, look at what Anton's doing, and I think the average age of employees at Lovable is like 19, 20. It's amazing to see. And they're so excited about the mission and the vision that I'm sure that they'll stay the course.
Matt, one of the end goals, an IPO, I mean, financial journalists obsess about this. Does it matter that the US is still proving that allure in terms of listing?
I personally don't think it matters that much. I feel like the US has built the central hub for great companies to go list on the public exchanges. And I know there's a lot of nationalism around we should have more listed here in Europe, and I understand that. But I also think it's a great source of pride that our company is able to list in New York. All the best companies in the world go to list in New York right now. We should try to have more competitive exchanges, but it's a great thing when European companies are able to list on the same exchange and go toe-to-toe with the best companies in the world on one marketplace.
Paul, do you agree? It's not too much of a problem? I mean, a lot of people, there's a lot of hand-wringing about how we rebuild our capital markets to make them more attractive to your kind of portfolio companies.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with Matt on this point. I think the only opportunity that we have is there are some brands that are very well known in Europe that aren't as well known in the US. I think for those, it's a missed opportunity because they have to go to the US, educate the market on what they're building, whereas if they could list in a vibrant ecosystem in Europe, that might be better for them.
I might ask slightly unfair questions. We count down to 3 minutes on the clock. Maybe I'll start with Ophelia. If you look across the companies now that you have not invested in but you wish you had, any that spring to mind, Ophelia?
I certainly wish we were shareholders in 11 Labs.
In 11 Labs.
Yeah, that will firmly sit in my
$6.5 billion
yeah.
valuation?
Yeah.
Okay, shout out to Matty there. 11 Labs. Paul, let me turn that one to you.
So the way I answer this question is we invest at every stage. So
Yep.
Unless they've IPO'd, it's not too late for us. So I'm not going to answer the question.
I mean,
am I going to let Paul off with that one?
You said let off scot-free. You've only just started.
Yeah. So Advancing is a clean slate. So far we've done the ones we wanted to. But I mean, in my investing career, obviously,
in your career,
I have a long list. So like, how long do we have? You know, we only have 2 minutes left. But yeah, of course there are many. And you know, I think probably the most recent one was we missed the opportunity to invest in Mercor, and that was an incredible company that I really liked. But there's I think every investor's career is with the would've, should've, could've's, and they haunt us all the time at night. But I think the point for this audience is like, you know, nobody is perfect. Yeah. We all keep trying and keep working to do the best we can. But the opportunity is ripe, and like there's so many great companies to back and be part of. And even though we may have missed some of these over our careers, there's many more great ones coming that we get to invest in, which is exciting.
I mean, you're all based in London. We're here in Turin, in Italy, but you're all based in London. I mean, what does that say? What does that signal about regional strengths?
Well, we're actually distributed. We set up our team, one person in Berlin/Munich, one in Paris. I'm between London and Madrid. And our view of Europe is, like Matt said earlier, you don't have this concentration in Silicon Valley. Mm-hmm. And so we have to kind of be where our founders are. Now, most of our business is in London. Our office headquarters is there, but we kind of spread ourselves out.
Okay.
I mean, we have the 29 companies in the portfolio, only 4 of those are in London. We have companies everywhere from Dublin to St. Gallen in Switzerland to Tallinn in Estonia. Our thesis is predicated on the fact that founders can be building from anywhere in Europe, and that's the beauty because they know that building locally for your own country is not going to make $1 billion or $100 billion business.
Okay.
I think the reason so many of us live in London is because London is one of the best cities in the world. Yeah. I'm very pro-London, as we talked about earlier this week. I mean, I believe London is the next best place after San Francisco to build an AI company. Yes, you can build them from everywhere. They are being built from everywhere. But it has the best community, it has the best access to capital, it has incredible set of companies and talented people to learn from. And I think I am bullish on the London ecosystem compounding and getting better and better with time. We had a period of time post-Brexit when it was like looking dismal for London, but I feel like we've come back, and we've come back with that because we see great companies succeeding, and we see other large companies hiring and building great teams in London. And I think that's inspiring. It makes it a great place.
Okay, there's strengths across Europe, of course, and London with the capital markets and that interaction between talent and capital. But this is a pivotal moment, and you've talked about it and you've defined it for us in terms of what a shift we could see, particularly when it comes to AI, that the capital is there. It doesn't necessarily matter if you're European startups and if your portfolio companies are going to list in the US, and the ambition is there, and that you are there to back these incredible companies that we need to succeed. So thank you all very much indeed. Paul Murphy, Lightspeed, of course, Ophelia Brown of Blossom Capital, and of course, Matt Miller of Avantic. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you all for this panel, a lot of optimism. Let's move on a fireside chat entitled Lessons from the .com Era, Navigating Hype Circles and Building Enduring Companies. So this conversation will explore lessons from navigating the .com boom and bust that today's AI founder need to hear. So this session reveals the operational discipline required when markets turn and why the patterns from 2000 are already repeating today in today's AI landscape. So, essential insights for founders who want to build AI companies today that survive and thrive regardless of market cycles, delivered through the lens of someone who has seen it all before. So I'm very pleased to welcome on stage Doug Leone and Diego Piacentini.
Okay, this is the last time you're going to see me, I swear. You won't see me anymore. Allora, Doug, la facciamo in italiano?
Sì.
So, he knows more than that, right?
Sì, un pochettino di più.
Because Doug was born in Genoa, right?
Sì.
Why don't you
Io
tell
sono
us 1 minute
genovese.
about yourself?
So I was born in Genoa in a very tough street called Via del Pre, which is the first street off the port, where you couldn't walk at night unless you were a protected kid. I was a protected kid, so I could go buy milk. If you showed up, you may not come out. And we emigrated to America because we were poor, basically, in 1968.
And how old were you?
11.
11. Okay, good. And he has both passports, Italian
I do.
and US, right?
I do.
Okay, so AI.com era.
Yes.
We're both old enough. We see them both.
Well,
right?
speak for yourself.
Okay, you're right. Do you think that, what's the difference between the AI wave versus the previous wave? You saw at least two. Well, actually, you saw three.
Yeah, I saw many waves. So I think there's two differences. One is the violence of the wave, the steepness of the slope. As waves increase, and let me take you back, semiconductor wave, systems wave, LAN waves, .com wave, mobile wave, AI wave, the slope of the curve is higher and higher, so they're more violent. Second, the amount of time between head fake and reality is shorter and shorter. So just take you back to 1999. There were a couple of great companies built in 1999. You're one of them in Amazon, the others Google. There were a lot of others, Inktomi, that came and went. But then we had 4 or 5 years of lull, and then lots of companies. In a mobile wave, Netscape went public in 1995. In a mobile wave, the iTunes store came out in 2008. We had all these little apps, and we didn't know how to monetize the little apps. And little did we know of DoorDash, in which you're on a board, or Airbnb. That took 2 or 3 years. I think that time is compressed in the AI wave. I think the time between initial couple of companies, a couple of years a lull, or sometime a lull, and then lots of things is going to be even more compressed. So I am wildly optimistic. While I call those waves, I call AI the industrial revolution. That's my view.
Okay.
Now, in your case, you live through a wave, and a wave is composed of high waves, the amplitude is the highest, and trough. And Amazon was, if you will, the first company that decided to burn a ton of cash and grow almost at all costs. And then the trough hit, and you had to survive. Talk a little bit about what caused you to be so aggressive at a time when all analysts thought you were crazy, lots of investors, and how you survived the trough.
Yes, and everybody loved eBay and didn't like Amazon. So I joined January 2000, and the historical context, the bubble bursted in, I don't know, March, something like that. And still remember, we went from get big fast to, you're going to laugh at this, MMSSGG. What does that mean? We all collected our efforts around MM, make money. At that time, the company was unprofitable. SS, which was single store, needs the context. Amazon had a marketplace separate from the retail store. We merged the two, and we created a marketplace on Amazon. And the GG was touching directly my job, which is go global. So we did not stop the investments, but we definitely focused on, we closed the huge fulfillment centers. We did this deal with Toys R Us and Target so that we could monetize our expertise. We did things like, we like acronyms. We did something called CRAP, which is can't realize a profit. We knew that we're shipping products that would cost us more to ship than the profit of the product itself. So we really gathered all the efforts, and every S team was about those things here. So but don't give up the growth. We decided that we would go global, we would do the deal with Toys R Us and Target, we would do the single store, because if you give up, it's easy to cut costs and give up growth.
Wonderful.
So on your side, lots of AI companies, different LLMs. How are you going to differentiate? Asking the winners from the losers is very, very hard. But how do you differentiate in this market? Do you see that as an investor?
So we have a point of view, and that is that ultimately value is going to accrue to the application layer. That has happened in the past. It doesn't mean the future is going to be like the past, but that's our point of view. So we think the LLMs are important. We're investors in OpenAI and some other companies we don't talk about, but we also think there's a way to differentiate. So I'll take a couple examples. We're investors in Harvey, legal. Think of that as a vertical type of LLM. We are investors in open evidence, where about half the doctors in America are using it. So to us, specialization in vertical markets, proprietary workflow, proprietary data, trust and safety. To us, there's a million ways to start companies, get a lot closer to the customer, get a lot closer to the value, get a lot closer to the person with money. The person with money is not using LLMs. He needs an application on top of it. And so that is, in our opinion, what you should do. And we think there is a ton of opportunities in ways we can't even begin to fathom. Now, on your case, though, how do existing companies survive this AI wave? What should they do?
Well, again, if they have to do something new from scratch, it means they had already failed. So, because you're not going to change strategy just as a reaction to the fact that things are moving so fast. First of all, I think that you need to realize as a startup, are you in a land rush market, or are you in a place where your solution can wait for perfection? My suspicion is now it's a lot of land rush. And that looked a lot like in the 2000s, right? Amazon went global very, very fast because they did not want others to go before. That was it. The other one is, this is something rhetorical, but do you have a solution and are you solving a real problem, or do you have a technology waiting for a solution to pop up or waiting for a problem to pop up? And if you're in this case, you're in a very non-protected area. The other one is, and goes to the theory of constraints. What are your bottlenecks to growth and what are your bottlenecks to profitability? And you really, really need to focus on those bottlenecks and make sure that you understand what those bottlenecks are. Is the bottlenecks sales? Is the bottlenecks the technology itself? Is the bottlenecks the fact that your product doesn't have a market fit and you need to work on that? So it's this amazing awareness on the business. And the other thing, which is now very different, I think, from it's the wavelength. At Amazon, we built every single component of our stacks. We built our customer service software. We built our ERM, everything. Now, I see companies, they're building their web scrapers, their syndication layer, their agent-to-agent conversations. I mean, in the last 3 months, I saw companies doing orchestration layers. So the build versus buy now is the key question. And you need to make sure that you're not building things that are going to be available off the shelves in 2 months. In your case, we always talked about the word talents, how talents are important. So how do you build the team that can thrive in the AI?
So I think I should take you through 5 seconds of history. 25 years ago, we would get profitable quickly. In fact, I had an argument with someone a couple of days ago in Israel. He said, you should get us profitable. You ought to get profitable as quickly as you can. We wouldn't travel to Europe until US was profitable. And then we became interconnected. And things just moved a lot faster. The cost of capital came down. And as long as you're profitable at the unit economics level, you should go as fast as you can. And things move a lot faster. If you look at OpenAI and the adoption of ChatGPT, the cost of sales of that product is zero. The danger thereby being the cost of replacement is zero. And so what is the option you have when you live in this new world, where you can adopt very fast, you can change very fast, and people can leave you quite fast? And the answer is you've got to build product as fast as you can, and you have to have a mindset of people that can move as fast as you can. And that, at the cost of sounding kind of inappropriate, that brings you to youth. Because the older people get, the more they're used to the world they were living in.
I can say that. You can't because you're younger.
Yeah, I'm younger, of course. I'm saying that, sorry for offending you. And so you have to hire people that are willing to move very fast, and you have to be able to move. You have to be able to move even when you've got imperfect data. And the lesson I learned during down markets, and I lived through the down markets of 1999 and the down market of 2008, the lesson I learned, you never take your foot off the accelerator of building product. You keep on building. Maybe you slow down sales, which is very expensive to ramp up sales, but you don't start building product because that becomes your wall. And so during up markets, cost of capital is cheap. You run as fast as you can. During down market, cost of capital is more expensive. You maybe pull back on sales a little bit, keep on building that wall called product, because product is the center of a company. Now, in your case, you built a global organization. Tell us the lessons that some of these folks or all these folks can take away from the experience that you had and how to go global fast and quickly.
First of all, the question underlies one factor. If you are in AI, you cannot be a domestic company. It's just, you can start there, improve the products, test the products, but in order to scale, you need to go beyond your borders, and that's absolutely the right thing to do in that description. So the first question to ask is, it's an organization question before a type of hiring question, which is, what kind of my technology, what is the technology that I don't need to change too much to go global? Because if you have to tweak change, try to adopt, and sometimes you adopt on something that really doesn't exist because some sales guys are telling you that the clients, they're different, then you're kind of losing the battles already. So the point is that what are all the pieces of my business that can be touched as little as possible to go global? Once you have that, and especially, you need to make sure that your technology is expandable without too many changes. Obviously, the data sources are going to be different. Talking about Harvey, right? I mean, I believe that when they go global, obviously the data ingestion about the laws are different, but the technology is going to be the same. It's not going to change. And if you have to tweak it too much. So that's an organization part and a technologist part. The other is about talent. What is the kind of people that you need to run your business outside the US? And I think that the US or Germany or the UK, if you're a European company, a lot of those companies make the mistake of hiring through credentials. They look at the CV, they say, oh, this guy's been running Airbnb in France, so he has the experience of working with a US company. And most of the times you need to realize if you are the country manager of an Airbnb, the country manager of Uber, or all those companies, it's a sales relationship job. So do you need that? If you need that, that's perfect. But if you need people that are also about technology, they're also about marketing, because the marketing strategy is different, then you need to hire based on that, and not based on the fact they've been working at similar companies before. So that's, and the other point is, which is the hardest one, obviously, you always want to hire missionaries and not mercenaries. Yeah. So you need to really understand who are the people that believe in the missions you're building, and they're there for the long term. Yes, you can make mistakes. Yes, people can decide to leave anyway, but you need to identify the key players that will be part of the expansion. Yeah. That's so important. And you've seen that.
And if I can add to that, so we can go off this boring script that we were given here, I can't tell you how many times we have hired the salesman or the sales manager that could sell $15 million for big company A, say Cisco Systems of yesteryear, and couldn't close a $100,000 order for a startup. So you have to interview.
That's very interesting.
You have to interview from first principles. It's not just a resume. First of all, you want to stay away from people that are well-traveled. I call them the two-and-out people. They last in a company for 2 years. They have excuses for every job. I've given up just listening to those two-and-out people. And then that's not enough. That's a necessary but not a sufficient condition. And the other one is that they lost a step. Because in these big companies, they're order takers in sales or in engineering. They're not doing very much anymore. They're administrators. And so we've learned hire for first principle, figure out the questions for your business, and go get those people.
Let me reinforce this part, and I'm going to be self-critical towards the company I work with, which is a lot of the people leaving Amazon, they fail outside of Amazon.
That's right.
Because they think they're good, and then they get lost in the startups. And they were not good, they were effective. They were effective because they were working in a machine that was super organized, and everybody had precise tasks. Hence, they were successful. And this is why, and I actually mentioned in a conversation before, you need to make sure that you have a culture that understands where there are good mistakes and there are bad successes. When I see a CV of a salesperson that says, I grew the sales of my region of 85%, I close the CV right now. First of all, because they use the word I, and second, because there's no causality and it's confusing correlation with that.
Exactly.
That's so part of that.
Wonderful.
You've seen so many companies. You see companies going down, going up. What is the pattern, or is there a common identifier for the entrepreneurs that are successful?
I think it may surprise you to learn in that world, nothing's changed. This is how you build, in my opinion, a great company. First of all, you need to have wonderful founder or founders that have a very clear vision. And you know that by how they articulate it. If they can't articulate it, they can't think it. So to me, what comes out of here is connected to what's in there. And the skills you need early on are engineering and product management. Then you have to hire the first 4 or 5 people have to be A+ people. Because if you start with A- or B+, you'll never move up to A+. That's a must. If you're in B2C, you've got to have a quality product. If you're in B2B, you can afford to give your corporate customers something that's halfway broken because they'll understand you're building a new product. So you espouse your vision, you get it in there, wonderful things happen when you have that communication. Then you build that product, and then you have to expand in concentric circles because the best products look like utilities. They're very simple products to understand and to adopt. Give me a company with 5 $100,000 or euro type customers, then 2 $500,000 customers. A lot more money. No, I want customer contact, want diversity of customers, and so on. The simplest product, the better it is. Then you expand in utilities, I call it utility, simple product, and one day they wake up and they figure out they had a platform, like Amazon. They first started with books, utility, CDs, everything. One day you bought everything. You brought your underwear out at Amazon. You couldn't believe you did that. But the interesting thing is then you build a second pillar, in your case, AWS. So first you expand as much as you can, then you build a second pillar. Which brings me to my question, how the heck did you find AWS? What gave you the right to build that product? Something, a little luck must have happened because I can't imagine Jeff out of his brain that's selling all kinds of stuff one day says, you know, we need data centers. So how did that happen?
So, first of all, I was among the skepticals. I was not the only one on the S team that says, why on earth are we doing this cloud computing thing? We should be focusing on building our retail business. I was talking like a McKinsey consultant, and I was completely wrong. Jeff, and this was not a Jeff idea. This was coming from some technology team that observed how, 45% of our server power were used in 2 months, less than that. And based on that observation and how you can actually decide to sell the other months, that's how the cloud computing idea came out. So it is the inventiveness and innovation culture at Amazon that allowed that to happen.
Got it.
I don't think this is replicable because, especially you startup here, don't go and jump in inventing another business. Try to do well what you're doing. But it is something that is so hard to, cloud computing should be invented by Microsoft, not by Amazon. But it was this combination of giving the freedom of bringing new ideas and obviously the observation of jumping on them. I believe there was a lot of resistance. Great. I was one of the ones saying, this is we're wrong, we shouldn't be doing this. I missed a $500 billion business.
We have time for one more.
Yes,
according to that, we have time for one more question.
So, markets that are protected and markets that are in danger, or businesses that are protected and businesses that are in danger.
So, I've done a little chart for myself. I think productivity tools, creative tools, now we're investors in Figma, and I trust that Dylan is going to AI that company. But productivity, single-use tools, SMB tools, because the SMBs look for best of breed, not all different categories. I think they're in danger. If I go to the middle tier, I think the systems of record, things are protected, but I'd rather have the workflows of a ServiceNow than the thin layer of CRM of a Salesforce.com. Workday's in the middle, you figure out what the other functional areas. Things that I think are protected are things that are in deep vertical market, proprietary data, and so on. I think in that order, when I look at companies, I think of where are you in this thing, and how are you going to play it? But conversely, what should companies do, as the last question, in order to protect themselves with this barrage of new startup and AI companies that are coming?
From a macro standpoint, it's understanding what are the inputs of your business to drive the growth. Too many companies, too many CEOs, too many founders are focused on the ultimate outcome without understanding what the inputs are. Quick example, in Amazon, we're not discussing during the weekly business reviews Revenue. Yeah, you mentioned revenue. It's important, right? You mentioned revenue profitability, but you jumped immediately on the inputs of revenue. What was the in-stock? What was our pricing compared to competition? What was the supply chain defects? So having this great understanding of your inputs, the outcomes will come.
Wonderful. Grazie mille a tutte voi. Grazie.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for this insightful conversation. So now we are going to welcome on stage two other investors, but very different from Sequoia. One is leading a corporate venture fund launched by a European unicorn, and the other one is from an independent growth fund that has been key in creating many of Europe's success stories. I'm happy to welcome on stage Milda Jasaitė and Henrik Persson.
Hey.
Buongiorno.
Buongiorno. So we should talk about Vinted, among other things. So let's maybe take a test of the Vinted awareness in the audience. How many people have bought anything on Vinted?
Nice.
Not bad. We need sellers though, so how many people sell on Vinted?
Nice. We have those network effects going. Sellers becoming buyers, buyers becoming sellers.
It's amazing.
That's great.
How many will try Vinted after this? Hey.
Okay. Some referral rate is happening.
I'm not sure about the acquisition cost on that one, but Vinted. Let's go back to the beginning. You're running Vinted Ventures, but Vinted has a longer history. Can you tell us?
Right. So Vinted, actually, I was counting, started 17 years ago, back in 2008. It was founded in Lithuania and out of a very personal problem. So co-founder of Vinted, Milda Jasaitė, she was actually about to move apartments, and she realized that she had a lot of clothes she didn't need anymore. I think she said she had around 300 items, and her new wardrobe would only fit around 100. So around the time, she also was going to a party. She met her old friend, who was a developer, Justas Janauskas, and they started talking about her problem. They were brainstorming whether a platform where you can buy and sell clothing, whether actually could solve the problem. Justas wasn't initially convinced, so they had to run the first market research at the party, and they got some positive signals. I think it was 2 minutes, and they were convinced that, okay, this idea actually has legs. So Justas started developing the next day, and that's how Vinted was born, back in 2008. And fast forward to today, we are in 23 markets. We are expanding beyond fashion. So actually, anything you have at home, we'd love for you to be able to buy and sell on Vinted. We are also next to Marketplace, running payments business unit, shipping business unit. So we're going deeper into the value chain. And actually, around 40% of our users say that now secondhand is half of their wardrobe. So we actually see that what was a platform for Mildas and Justas and their friends' problems is now resonating with millions of our users. So that's where we are today. You know this even better than I do. There's a caveat to the story. So around 2016, company was in a more troubled situation. There was a little runway left, and so the founders invited the current CEO, Tomas Plantenga, to come into Vilnius and actually help them find the right strategy. And Tomas came up with a lot of bold suggestions. One of them was to reorganize the company, which actually meant a lot of layovers. He also came up with the idea to change the business model and to start investing very actively into user acquisition. The founders discussed it with him and actually bought into the plan, and the turnaround happened. So they rode out the storm, and around 2018, they went out fundraising again. It was maybe the third or the fourth fundraising round. And I know that at the time, they had the backing of the current investors, but you were the first external investor to come in at the time. Right. So can you tell the audience a little bit more, what did you see that made you so bullish? What did you see in Vinted?
So, I'm old enough to have grown up with the first generation of classified businesses. So think of Blocket in Sweden, Le Bon Coin in France, Subito in Italy. My co-founder in Sprint, Pierre, was actually creating these companies and founded them and launched them out in Europe. And we were pretty sure at the time that the network effects those had created were very, very difficult to attack and challenge. And then we started looking at Vinted, and one thing struck us, because we had always run around the world saying Le Bon Coin in France is probably the best marketplace. It had taken the old model, but it made it freemium, so it was free to list on Le Bon Coin, and it was a massive network effect. And the first market where Vinted started to grow and really kind of become a strong player was in France. And I was like, but this can't be. Like,
right.
According to my cookbook, this is not going to happen. So then we went, why is this happening? And you had, born out of, this is interesting, I think maybe a good takeaway for many founders, born out of that desperation of not having enough money to pursue your first idea, you had really had to rethink the idea of Vinted. So you've turned it into a freemium model and a buyer pay model. And you had added all the latest technologies on that purchase. So I, as a buyer, had to pay, which is kind of counterintuitive in the marketplace, but I got so much in return for paying. I got the free shipping, or the shipping, I don't know if it's free, but I got the shipping, the escrow, and a whole kind of much more convenient checkout and fulfillment process versus the old classifieds. And that really took off. So the combination of the innovation and the challenging the most powerful marketplace was quite impressive. And I'm thinking, when I look back at that, and I look at the team that we interacted with, and I look at Vinted today, Justa still comes to the board meetings, like the founder 17 years later. Thomas is still there. He's working harder than ever. What is it in the spirit that made Vinted go through these hard times, pivot, and now come out stronger than any other marketplace in Europe? What is the core of the...
Right. So I think the team definitely has a lot of drive, and I think it comes from the fact that we are building out a new category, because re-commerce is a different type of e-commerce. So you have the building blocks from e-commerce that you can use, but they have to be adapted. So for example, shipping cannot be too expensive, because otherwise no one is gonna buy or sell a €3 t-shirt. Payment needs to work for a C2C, consumer-to-consumer transaction flow. So there's these deeper problems that we actually have to solve while we're also building out a platform and acquiring users and making sure that they are trading successfully. And I think because of this kind of potpourri of things we need to solve, there's this drive. I think another thing is the turnaround. I think it's still ingrained in the company, and so that means that we're kind of not able to just sit back and be comfortable. And perhaps the third element is that Vinted was founded in Lithuania, is headquartered there. We have quite a lot of teams based there, and Lithuania is a young country, very much with a big drive to succeed. People are ambitious, they're analytical, they're resilient, and I think this also very much resonates with the company values that we have. So I think in total, I mean, everyone knows e-commerce. Not everyone knows re-commerce yet. I think re-commerce is at something like 10% perhaps of the kind of total e-commerce sales. So there's definitely a long way to go, and that just by itself kind of translates into this drive.
And now if I can challenge that a little, so you're still the drive, the young, spirited company, but now you're heading ventures. So if you need to have a venture arm, does that mean you've become a little old in your old spirit? And why are you launching a venture arm?
Right, so we definitely don't think ourselves as a sort of corporate, as a stagnant company. We're still growing fast, even though we are close to 2,000 people team. And we're in 23 markets. We actually make decisions quick. We're building things. We're using technology wherever we can to solve it. So we really don't like to think ourselves as a corporate. And why we're doing Vinted Ventures is because we are in the midst of the market that's being created. So we know e-commerce can be big because we already were able to push the boundaries to the current levels, but we think there's still a long way to go. So basically, our idea with Vinted Ventures is to back the companies that are either building the platforms or going deeper into the value chain and creating the solutions that can actually enable e-commerce. And I think what's important, though, for us, and of course, is that the companies would be able to scale. I think it also comes a little bit from the type of company we are. We really like to understand what's the logic behind the solution. So why is this supposed to be the best solution out there? Why is it better than the competitors? What is the dynamic, that leads to this company being able to scale? Because that's also how we think about our own business. So we actually want to also see kind of the first signs of it in the companies we invest. So therefore, we decided that we're going to start in Series A. And I think the last bit is that even though we invest in these industry pockets that are close to us, we do this with a financial return in mind. So actually, every company we invest in, we want to have the conviction that this can be an outsized player down the line.
And just so people realize, I don't know if everyone listened to Thomas' podcast recently, but he has an idea of Vinted becoming the Amazon for used goods. And having 50 billion in GMV, or I don't know what he mentioned, but a huge company. That would be one of Europe's it would be Europe's largest marketplace business if his dream comes true. So in terms of how you look at what you want to add from the venture arm and what you can bring to companies, what would that be that you're looking for?
Right, so I do think that capital is still the most important thing that we can bring, but from our own experience, I think there are also three other things. So I think one of them is, let's say, our experience. So as mentioned, we have scaled out quite a bit. So we have certain playbooks, certain frameworks, certain metrics, and that can be just kind of a helpful guide on the side. The second one is the approach. We are, I think you know this quite well, we are a very data-driven company, also very much technology-driven. So that means we can also bring perhaps a different way of looking at the problem, which can perhaps be useful for the founder as kind of an adjacent way of looking at the problem they're solving. And the third one is that we are a business. So in some cases, we could be a client for the startups and actually anchor part of their growth. And even though we launched very recently, meaning we launched Vinted Ventures very recently, I already seen like pockets of this being real. So for example, we were talking to this company that's actually even pre-Series A, very early, building a platform in another market outside of Europe. And we're just discussing with them, usually at this phase, this is what we would see. These are the things we would push on. These are the things that we think are important. These are the things where we think you shouldn't worry too much that it's at that rate. And for the founder, it's just like, oh, okay, that brings me, another level of understanding, perhaps give me some comfort around uncomfortable decisions. It definitely doesn't mean that the companies need to run our playbook. That's not the idea. It's more giving them, the reference point, and that perhaps enables them. I think on the approach, we're at these advanced conversations with another company, and I have a team member who's building out a thesis, and he's asking so many questions to the founder to actually understand, why is this technology supposed to be better? And then the founder came back to us a couple of days ago, and he's saying, hey, I actually find these very insightful, so I think I'm just going to kind of add them to the Q&A, perhaps adjust a little bit the narrative, and so it's going to help me in this current fundraising that I'm doing. So we're like, okay, that's actually very happy about that. And the third one is on the growth. So there's a company that we're working with, and they're still early stage. We think they should be pushing faster for the growth versus profitability. And the nice thing is we can walk the talk here because we can give them part of our business and therefore anchor part of the growth so that then they can go to the other clients and continue growing. So these are the kind of additions which can be very important, but still the main thing for us is that we're providing capital. because we're looking for the founders that have their vision, that have their ways, and they need this capital to amplify that. So that's still the primary goal.
And a shortcut to get to millions of users and
But
buyers.
wait, I actually want to stop here because these are the things that we want to do kind of with Vinted Ventures. But you founded Sprints 10 years ago. And at that time, in the European VC scene, what was important for you when you were shaping Sprints? Like, what did you want to be kind of the cornerstones of how you operate? And has that changed for you in the past 10 years?
So maybe politically incorrect at a tech conference, but I just felt tech was too much, or tech investing was too much about the new thing, the new technology, the new tech conference, and a lot about capital. Everyone was raising capital, everyone was complaining about not enough capital. But what we saw was that the generation of, and Vinted firmly and squarely fits into that, is that the kind of companies that are 5-10 years old, the best tech companies coming out of that first phase are incredibly good companies, and they're good because customers love them, because they can grow capital efficiently. They can be some of the most profitable companies in the world. So tech kind of is the birthbed of the best companies in the world. Maybe not always, I mean the best technologies, but ultimately value is created by solving a problem for a customer and creating a very successful company. And so capital and technology here, happy customers and great companies here. We wanted to focus here. So we're building a portfolio of companies that have super happy customers and very efficiently managed businesses, so very profitable. So less about the disruption and capital and tech and abbreviations and more about people using products. Having said that, of course, someone needs to start at some point with a dream of a new technology, but and so I'm mindful of standing on the shoulders of the early stage giants in the venture ecosystem. So if we go back to the venture ecosystem, what is your dream to contribute from Vinted side into feeding it?
So I think for us, we have this clarity that we want to invest in e-commerce. We also have the clarity that we do this with a financial return in mind. I think the fact that we do it with a financial return in mind is actually a very good thing for two reasons. One of the reasons is that if we do this with a financial return in mind, it means it's sustainable, because then Vinted Ventures can actually continue to back the companies. And it might be sometimes tempting to think like, hey, I want to invest in this so I stay close to this model or to this market or things like that. But we actually really want to get behind the logic of why this is the model that's supposed to succeed. So I think that's number one. I think another reason also why having financial return in mind is good is that it's also kind of a proxy for companies' ability to scale. And as we invest in e-commerce, for example, for Vinted, we do kind of sustainability reporting. And one of the metrics that we're looking at is that we estimate that around 40% of purchases on Vinted are replacing a purchase that would have done for, let's say, first-hand. So that's kind of the main positive impact that we're doing. And because we invest in e-commerce, it's possible that other companies we back are also going to have a positive impact. And because we do this with a financial return in mind, and if these companies are able to scale, which is the goal, then it means they can create this impact at scale. So I think it's kind of very natural that we do this financial return in mind, but then we do this within the broad e-commerce space.
Good. How important are the numbers versus the spirit of the company and the energy of the founders and the drive?
I think you told us when we were having the first call that we want to launch Vinted Ventures, and knowing us, you told us don't excel your way out of the investment opportunities, because at Series A there's only that much of data that you can get. And I think that's a very good comment. We cannot expect that the companies will have the same depth in terms of data analysis, or the same precision in forecasting, or maybe the same understanding of all of the drivers. So we definitely need to keep that in mind. But I think the fact that we're Vinted Ventures, we're still building part of our culture into the process. And of course, from the fact that we want to see the founders that really understand the problems they're solving, that are able to put the team together and just are really focused, we also want to be able to have this kind of numbers as a proxy to then be able to really interpret and get behind it.
I'll tell you a secret I haven't told you. When we invested our first round, the first time in Vinted, we had a long negotiation with Thomas, and in the end, he pushed us from 150 million in valuation to 200 million in valuation. And at that time, I said, I'm not going to pay anything more than 200, because we had all our models and we had done all the calculation. And in the world of wonders of tech, the last valuation was 5 billion, and I think that's not where you're going to finish. So the quality of our own modeling is questionable. Before we finish, to everyone here who wants to get in touch with you and discuss Vinted as an owner, potentially, what should they do? How do they get hold of you?
We're very easy to approach. Ping us on LinkedIn. We have Vinted Ventures page. Write us what you're building. We'll jump on the call. We'll understand. We'll hope to understand better. We'll ask you tons of questions. We'll probably throw a lot of questions around, the kind of what is really driving your business, what do you want to achieve, how big can this get, but we hope to have a very good conversation, and I think we start from there.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Great.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now you will hear how Europe can compete globally in the innovation race and what it takes to turn ideas into billion-dollar businesses. So I'm very happy to welcome on stage someone that does a lot for the European tech ecosystem. He's behind a Founders Forum, Brent Hoberman, interviewed by Tim Bradshaw from the Financial Times.
Hi, great. Brent, thanks very much for being here as the stage slowly starts to evolve. Yes. I was trying to do a quick bio, but it doesn't seem like that's possible with the time we have. But for those who are not familiar with Brent Hoberman, let me just do a quick recap. 1998, co-founded lastminute.com, one of the pioneering travel sites. 2000 took it public, sold for $1 billion in 2005, which is a lot of money in those days. Right after that, you founded Founders Forum. That's been going for 20 editions now, one of Europe's best tech gatherings of tech founders. You did Pro Founders Capital. You co-founded Made.com, an online furniture retailer. That went bust in 2022. Maybe we'll come back to that. Maybe we won't. 2013, Founders Intelligence. You sold to Accenture. I mean, I could go on. I guess First Minute Capital, a $500 million seed fund. You've advised several prime ministers. Is it really true, Brent, that European founders don't work as hard as American competitors?
Yeah, I'm controversially happy to say I don't think they do. I think they have to actually work a lot harder than US founders to be more successful because of all the barriers we throw at them. So we could talk about that later. So I'm even more impressed by the entrepreneurs in Europe who do succeed because they're such outliers and they've had to work so hard against all the friction we throw at them and all the random regulations and all of that sort of stuff. They also have to it's harder to create a workaholic culture. So we all know that to be a successful founder, you have to basically be a workaholic. I have a couple of friends who told me they weren't and they only worked in the afternoons and they still built billion-dollar businesses, but I'm not really buying it. I think the problem with European work ethic, and there is some actually, and it's partly because we live in beautiful cities. We live in polycultures. The value of the valley is a monoculture too. It's that they go to bed at 6 or 7 p.m.
Yes.
Or they don't go to bed. There's nothing to do.
Yeah.
And then they just work. So they do just work all the time. And I believe in my friend Reid Hoffman, who says work-life balance. If a founder talks to him about work-life balance, it means they don't want to win. Work-life balance is a conversation. It shouldn't be amongst entrepreneurs. Your work is your life for that period of time. And if that's not what you want, that's okay. Do something else.
So does that mean we need to go all the way to the sort of China-style 996 thing to open a recent
a lot of people,
LinkedIn debate among VCs?
Yeah, people get
grief for this. You know, when I did lastminute.com a million years ago, would not have succeeded if I wasn't in the office basically 7 days a week.
Right.
I'm not that good, you know, to not succeed without working like a maniac. And I was into every micro detail. I had my conversion texted to me in those days across every category every 15 minutes. Oh. I would know when something was wrong before my tech team, which is a failure of mine, and I did try and fix that. But so yeah, I think there is. I think there's also something about where honestly the best founders are unhinged, and you know they're unhinged maniacs. And you know I was more unhinged then, but in Europe we are more balanced, and that's a good thing for life.
Right.
But
not always for a family.
Of course, what I do want to say is there are entrepreneurs here who work like crazy. Those are the ones we've been talking about all day today.
Right. On the subject of things being unhinged, what sort of parallels do you see between your first go-around on the dot-com boom or bubble and whatever we're calling this AI moment?
It's so much easier now and so much harder. You know,
right.
So to be nonsensical about it, it's obviously, look, when we started in '98, we had the question from our old bosses, who do you know who are two people with such limited experience, I was probably 28 and Martha was probably 25 or something, who've raised $1 million off a business plan. And we couldn't think of anyone.
Right.
So our former boss said, well, look, give yourself 6 months and come back and go back to consulting afterwards. So that's the bit that's differentiated now.
There's money.
There is money, and there is also revenue. You know, there wasn't really revenue then either.
Right.
But the problem is the barrier to entry then, capital was a bigger barrier to entry then. To be able to raise it was a barrier. Now there's a challenge and a debate about how much capital should you raise? Actually, I noticed Doug was on stage before, and I think I agree with everything Doug says normally, except I know he's on. I think he's been quoted as saying one thing at least at our event, which is that founders should raise as little as possible. I think was a Doug quote, if I'm not misquoting. Whereas I think founders should raise as much as possible, and dare I disagree with somebody who's funded everything successful, but particularly in a world where capital is cheap. So today, I guess what I'm trying to get to is the difference is today you can raise silly valuation seed rounds. You can raise tens of millions out the gate. You know, I'm not hoping people do that for our venture fund always, but you know, but
right. But and you think they should lean into that and take advantage of this moment because you never know when the music's going to stop.
Exactly, you never know when the music's going to stop, and then it might become a barrier again, right? It's the fact that you've got 100 million. I mean, lastminute.com, it was a barrier. We went public, raised 100 million pounds at the time, as you said. That was a lot of money, and people just ran away from trying to compete with us.
Yeah, and so, but I mean, I guess Europe's entrepreneurs in this AI moment, there are, to pick two examples, you have Lovable. Are you guys invested in Lovable?
I'm personally a small angel.
Okay,
not
great.
heroic, later
Excellent.
on, but yeah.
And so, you know, you've got Anton out there who's, you know, talking about his ARR all the time, very much kind of, you know, publicizing Lovable and the platform and leaning into the acceleration of this boom that we're seeing right now. Black Forest Labs, which is a company that I'm guessing a lot of people might not have even heard of, but also potentially a multi-billion-dollar valuation AI startup based in Germany, behind the image generation company Flux, but they're so low profile as to almost be invisible. Like, is there a sort of advantage if you're trying to sell, you know, a new product that you've got to be out there as the sort of founder CEO selling it, or kind of build in secret when there's so much competition and hope that you can win quietly from a literal forest?
Yeah, the obvious reasons for being out there, which we were as lastminute.com, is when you're building consumer products. But the next point is, it is a bit of a talent magnet. If you are being deemed to be an industry leader, like a Lovable, 11 Labs, Synthesia, whatever, who I would all put as out there, talent flows to you. Now, for Black Forest, I do know Robin, he is much more low-key. He's probably thinking, look, I've got a brilliant way of doing this. I've got my 10 core engineers. I need a little more time before I shout.
Right.
The FT obviously shouted for him, I think, this week.
Well, we try
3 to 400 million at 4 billion,
where we find it. Yeah. But so are there other ways that you're advising your portfolio companies to kind of behave tactically at this moment, or anything that you did that you're telling them not to do back then?
Anything I did
Don't go public too soon, I guess, maybe one of them?
Don't go public too soon, yes. Actually, that's a good one, and that can tie us back to Made, actually.
Okay.
So Made, as you said, and I said I've no problem.
You set me up for that, yeah.
I tell you what, Made went bust, and people think I'd be very embarrassed. Now, the first thing is, you shouldn't be embarrassed about your failures. That's very European. You should be happy to talk about them and the lessons. Now, obviously, easier for me to say with Made because I'm on record. I actually had to, the FT did have a go at me on it. And I actually had to write a letter to the editor at the FT and get it published. But the point of the letter was to say, well, firstly, it was to say, look, I left the company when it went bust. So that was the main thing. I was the founder, but not the guy. I wasn't even on the board.
Right.
I actually advised them, to your point, this is the segue, not to go public.
Right.
I said, it's wrong for you to go because I knew what the volatility of a public market was, and I thought they would be volatile too. And I hated running a public company when you're volatile. If you know what you're going to do quarter after quarter, and you've got this wonderful recurring revenue, real recurring revenue, and profits, public companies are a brilliant place to be. But a furniture business during COVID, when COVID was going to lift up, is not, it's not smart to do that. So what Made did, and the other lesson for entrepreneurs is, Made was pushed, I believe, to go public and to shoot for too high a valuation by its venture capitalist, who probably overpaid to get into the deal at 500 million-ish. Then they thought, okay, unless this company's worth 2 billion, we want to go home. It's not worth it. Whereas for the founders, 700 million would have been a great exit. They would have made a fortune, right? So that lack of alignment between venture capitalists and entrepreneurs can often be exacerbated in the IPO process.
Right. Are you surprised that there's not more companies looking to go public, though? If these ARR numbers that people are bandying around on social networks are real, are they real?
Well, I think one is they seem to have to go public in the US, as we discussed earlier, which is an even bigger step. And then your scale, what doesn't get talked about is don't go public when you're small. And small by, I mean, even a couple of billion in the US. Because then you're basically orphaned on the markets, and you don't get the liquidity that you think you're going to get. So the other point is obviously they can get the other difference between now and then, as it were, is secondary markets. You can sell, if you're an OpenAI employee, you can sell at 500 billion. You don't need to go public. You've got liquidity.
Yeah. Were there any other particular kind of stories from that era that resonate today that we should be recapping, or things that you, I don't know, I mean, you were in the spotlight then.
Yeah, we were in the spotlight. I mean, I think it's, there's the Schadenfreude, which I think might resonate with entrepreneurs that we talk about a lot.
That's definitely worse in, certainly, Britain.
I think it's worse in Britain. I was talking to a journalist yesterday, maligning the Daily Mail, which a lot of my friends do, on their ability to shoot down people. I mean, I think the last British.com story, just the one-liner on it is actually, even in the FT, forgive me, we were like the best thing since sliced bread before the IPO. We were amazing. These young wonderkins, whatever. The day the share price started going down, headline in the papers, Martha Lane Fox, my co-founder, is she the most hated woman in Britain? That wasn't in the FT, that was in the Independent. But,
I should hope not.
But so you do get that Schadenfreude is one thing. But the other thing is, for entrepreneurs, use it as a force. I think that's the lesson we took away is, at the time, in 2000, there were these idiots running Thomas Cook, for example, to name but one, genuinely, a guy who didn't think the internet was going to work, who genuinely thought people wouldn't buy package holidays on the internet. And I'm like, this is the Muppet, not us, who are investing. We were, as from the earlier panel, we were investing in loss-making because we had to invest £25 million a year to make the technology work. Today, obviously, that would probably cost $1 million or something, or less.
Do you, we talked about Lovable and Black Forest Labs. You're also, I think you're investors in Wave and Mistral, the self-driving car company.
Wave, Mistral, and A10, yeah.
Where do you, how do we feel about this argument about Europe, keeping up when it comes to that really foundational AI technology? And does that matter if you have great apps?
Yeah, look, I don't know the secret numbers of Mistral's ARR, but the FT reported it again at 1.4 billion, I think, was what it was.
They said that. I think they gave us that number.
Yeah. Okay. Great. So 1.4 billion. That's real money after. This is from Mistral after not long.
Yeah.
So
a couple of years.
Yeah. So there is real money there, and so obviously Mistral. The interesting thing about Mistral to me is the sort of pipeline of deals that make it so credible. You get Macron that presidential force, all credit to him and the way he supports his top entrepreneurs and puts them on stage all the time. I've been there many times. We miss that a bit in the UK. It's just not a presidential system like that. You can't do it. And then you've got the sequence of events is sort of like he gets the French corporates buying from him. He does the deal for European sovereign with Helsing. He has the NVIDIA sovereign cloud. And I think he's on record saying once he did that deal, people were throwing money at him.
Right.
So you get those steps, and you get the fact that there will be European leaders, and if you can make yourself credible enough to do that. So then going on to Wave, which of course, yes, we were seed investors, highly contentious. I was not a genius saying this is a slam dunk. I was like, oh my God, this is risky. We're going up against so many amazing players, but Wave, for those that don't know, embodied AI or autonomous driving AI, raised $1 billion already from Microsoft, NVIDIA, SoftBank, Uber, and NVIDIA have now said they'll put in another $500 million. And it's not just cars, but it's robots. So it could be a foundation layer for Europe in robotics, which has come up a lot today too. So very important, and a great story of a New Zealander founder, brilliant, young founder, probably in his mid-20s, coming to the UK, post-grad at Cambridge, the power that's come up today as well, the power of our world-class educational institutes, having a brilliant professor, Roberto Cipolla of Vision Technology at Cambridge, spinning out, getting money from us and mainly Americans in the early round, and then getting data from companies, and this we might go on to, is the corporate partnerships between startups. I think Wave did two, and the one I helped him a lot with, I'm proud to say, was the Ocado partnership, the online grocery. And actually also, because we're in Italy, we did also introduce Wave to Exor, which hopefully one day, I've no idea, they'll do a deal with Stellantis, but
Nissan, I think, is their first
Nissan is their
partner,
first
right?
one.
Yeah. But so do you think, I suppose there's still that kind of question. Mistral, it's great that we have them, but if you look at the scale of their sort of fundraising relative to the Anthropics, let alone the OpenAIs, it seems relatively cautious, almost. I say that acknowledging they're a $10 billion company, but it's not a $100 billion company. I think if they wanted to go harder, they probably could. Is that, I don't know, is that just a sort of European caution, or is that a more pragmatic approach for, they want to build a real business before they hit the
I think they were later to the party, That is one thing. They were a bit late. They were still early, but they were later. These other companies had started by then.
Yeah.
So that does make it harder. But the other thing, obviously, for Europe, if we can be the fast adopters of technology, I was hearing somebody else say this example, which I thought was great, is like the US is the fantastic home of technology, but you go to a US bank, normally a sort of high street bank in the US, and you get this terrible technology customer experience. You go to the UK and you have Monzo or Revolut or whatever, and you get a brilliant digital experience. So the question is, can we be fast adopters of this technology? There are lots of blockers, barriers, and I think it should be more of the exam question for our governments, is how do we get governments to buy European tech and our big corporates to buy European tech? The biggest drain on us isn't capital, it's customers. If you ask this question to many of the companies you mentioned, you say, what is it that would most make you move to America? They'll be like, because all my big customers are in America. Because the Americans will buy in 1 month or 2 months. The Europeans will have 100 meetings, and in 6 months we still haven't done a deal. So that's a cultural shift we have to change.
Right. Is that, I guess Stellantis just signed a deal with Mistral, so at least in the local vicinity, we've got a good example of that working. What are the, are there other things that you're working on that, on the corporate connection?
Yeah, so we are actually weirdly trying to put our money, or a little bit of where our mouth is, and launch a platform, foundersfile.com. It's very alpha. We haven't said this is really our goal, but it's fine to say it. Our goal is to build the profiles of the world's best entrepreneurs. Imagine if Jimmy Wales and Reid Hoffman, Wikipedia and LinkedIn had a baby. That's what the profile would be like. Beautiful thought. And then using AI to build all those profiles beautifully. And then make that a biz dev platform. Make it the platform where you get the world's best innovation teams from all the world's corporates linked in with a curated set of 1% of the world's best founders. So the signal to noise ratio is good. And you actually get those deals done.
Right.
Sorry, and also I should say, one thing in the intro, the other thing I do, which didn't get a shout out, I think, is Founders Factory.
Right.
So Founders Factory is a corporate-backed incubator and accelerator backed by 18 companies. It is in Milan, not here, but Milan, and backed by Mediobanca and Fastweb. So we also do that. We work with 15 of the world's best corporates, the Rio Tintos, Avivas, EasyJets of this world, to help them work with startups. So we are doing it, and yes, it's painful, but we're doing it.
Okay. You talked about the problem of driving founders to the US at a time when H1Bs are being curtailed or given a high price tag. Do you see a lot of traffic coming back this way and in the last 9 months, or is that still not yet happening?
I think it's a bit soon,
Okay.
but I think we have got, after that H1B announcement, there was some announcements from our chancellor in the UK saying we're going to double the number of talent visas.
Right.
We actually administer the global talent visa under Tech Nation, or one of the administrators of these visas. But I think I'm allowed to say it could still be simpler. It could be marketed more. We could have more applicants. It's still good people get rejected. I have to be careful what I say. But there should be routes for more talent, more money going after it. If I were king for the day, I would have a head of talent, a minister for talent for the country. I would say this minister's goal, KPI, is to get the best talent to the UK. I don't think we have that. I think we have Home Office people who are very worried about the number of people coming into the country, and they don't differentiate between skilled and unskilled, which is insane.
Yep. Are there other things that you feel like governments can do to help? What are the smarter policies, and what are the ones that you, if you were king for the day, would spike?
When?
Sorry.
What are the other things government could do? I think...
Is the AI Act and the EU AI Act still hanging over?
I think the EU AI Act, it was somebody else saying this the other day, is it was thought of in a moment... well, actually, I do remember who it was, but it was Chatham House. But he's a former big politician in the UK was saying the problem with the AI Act, it was conjured up in a moment of peak fear. Europe tried to monopolize AI fear at one point. We tried to be the world leaders in AI fear, which is a bit sad when you're an optimistic tech entrepreneur. That's what we wanted to win at. But so we're on
so
the AI Act. So what he was saying is that that the AI Act really does. It was done before we politicians and even practitioners understood AI. It was done too early, and it was too cautious, and it is harmful. So that's basically the lines. And so it does need to be kicked into the very long grass and adjusted. The UK, it is actually arguably one of the very few Brexit advantages for tech. The tech sector in the UK was about 95% pro-Remain, so those don't begrudge the UK. We did want Remain. But it could be the one advantage is that if you can make regulation more pro-AI companies in the UK than the EU, you do have some opportunities.
What about the... sorry, one question just pops into my head and then it's popped right out again. So I'll skip to a different one. If you were going back 25 years, or if you were 20, in your 20s now, what would you be starting? Like, what do you think are the kind of promising sectors to leap into?
Yeah, I would probably be. We've mentioned it a bit now, but I just love the idea of being able to vibe code all your ideas and everybody being able to vibe code their ideas. So I think vibe coding entrepreneurship, and I was reminded today, we do have one of a charity that we're working with for entrepreneurship that actually is working on a platform to do that.
Right.
But I would do that myself in a bigger way. I think what I really mean is that you're going to get AI job displacement fast. I don't think it's been covered that much here, but it is everything everywhere all at once. So when you get that AI job displacement, how do you give people hope and stuff to do? And weirdly, I think enabling everyone to start their own business, well, not everyone, but most people.
Yeah.
And I think vibe coding is a brilliant way to do that.
What's your timeline for the job displacement and in the current moment? And do you feel like European governments are preparing?
Well, I see two angles on this, which is one, I'm this techno-optimist, and as a techno-optimist, the other thing I see is the only way out for us, and again, this was covered by Gillian Tett actually, is productivity in governments, for example. So you want massive AI adoption, we've alluded to that, to actually save cost in government, because we can't afford the governments as inefficient as they are today. You say that, it's a wonderful thing, because there'll be less wastage, and it's a taxpayer, I'm happy with that. But of course, it will be massive job displacement. I was with some people in the civil service last night in England. They're like, why have we not got 25% less? They started with 10 and then like 25% less people in the civil service. Easily done. They were saying it could easily be done. So that sort of job displacement, but equally, there are people who say the good news and bad news about this AI is the technology sort of getting ready, but actually technology in these things does take longer than you think to adopt in these big, cumbersome organizations. And as we discussed, probably even longer in European ones. So we probably got 5 years, I don't know.
Okay. So with a few seconds left on the clock then, do you feel like in this era of the AI boom / bubble, are we in 96 or 99?
96 being the good time, 99 being about close enough to the burst is what you're thinking.
I guess, yeah.
I think you have to assume we've got more years to run. And I'll go back to the Mary Meeker quote at the time of the bubble. So Mary Meeker, the famous, for those who don't know, the famous Morgan Stanley analyst who said, the thing about, she said this in 2000 at the height of the bubble, just before the bubble burst. She said, the thing is 90% of the companies are overvalued massively, but 10% are massively undervalued.
Right.
And I think we're in a similar place to that.
Okay.
Probably not less high than 90.
Okay. Great. All right. Well, we're right on time. Brent, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you very much, both of you, for this great conversation. So, after COVID, a lot of American and Asian investors left the European market. So, I will not give names, of course, but some of them are still here and are betting on European startups like Sequoia Capital. So to explain this choice, I'm happy to welcome on stage Luciana Lixandru, who will be interviewed by Tom Mackenzie.
What an entrance. Thank you, Italian Tech Week.
You preempted me. I was about to introduce you as another VC rock star, VC royalty, Luciana, who has backed companies, for those who don't know, like UiPath, which is a robotics software company, Deliveroo, and you sit on the board of Stripe as well, which most recently I think was valued north of 100 billion US dollars. So fantastic to get your thoughts given all of that deep experience and success as well. Luciana, we spoke on a previous panel with some within your industry about where Europe sits right now, how much of a watershed moment this is. Do you agree that this is a watershed moment for European tech?
Thank you for the great question. And first of all, I just want to say I'm so happy to be in Italy. I unfortunately don't come to Italy enough for work. I need to change this. I would love to have a board here. I don't have one yet. And yeah, it's a country I love. And I came to Italian Tech Week for the first time about 7-8 years ago. And it was, it's flourished so much. It's really impressive what the team here has done. Europe. I think Europe is on the right track. I've been a venture for a long time now. I'm going to date myself, so it's been 13 years, lucky 13. And I remember when I started, people used to ask themselves, can Europe build a billion-dollar company? And then a few years later, people were asking themselves, can Europe build a $10 billion company? And I think now we're in a spot where all of that has been proven, and we're asking ourselves, can Europe build a $100 billion company consistently? And I think that means we are on the right track. Of course, in my job, I'm oftentimes asked to compare Europe with Silicon Valley, and I think Europe needs to play its own game. We are our own geography, we have our own culture, we have a lot of talent, and yeah, I do think we're on the right track.
And we're on the right track to $100 billion plus. Is that enough of ambition? Should we be thinking, we're thinking NVIDIA, 4.5 trillion publicly listed, of course, the most valuable company on the planet. Should we be thinking above 100 billion to trillions? How realistic would that be for Europe?
We have to go step by step, right?
Okay.
I do think there are European founders who absolutely think on that scale. There are companies in Europe already in technology like ASML, SAP that are in the hundreds of billions of dollars. And there are scale-ups that are valued at $60, $70 billion plus and more. So I do think there is a path. But I think we need to take it step by step, and we will get there. Europe is just earlier. In the US, in the Valley, there has been a culture of entrepreneurship and venture capital since the 70s. I would argue, please, this may be controversial, but I would argue that the ecosystem here really started getting going about 15 years ago. So I think we're just on a different path of this long journey. And of course, we can always go faster and things can always be better. But I think we're on the right track. There are a couple of things that get me very excited. Mm-hmm. First of all, it's just the quality of talent and the quality of founders we're seeing in Europe. We did this work a while back, a few years ago, about the persona of decacorn founders. As much as you can look at personas and profiles, because obviously we invest in unique people who are outliers, but there were a couple of profiles that disproportionately ended up building very large businesses. One of them is repeat founders, and I don't mean founders who took a company public and then gave it another shot. I mean founders who had an exit, say $50 million to $500 million, and learned a lot, know what mistakes to avoid the second time around, had a taste of success and want to go bigger and bolder. And because Europe is just now maturing, now we're seeing this profile of entrepreneurs that are building companies and that really have the umph and the experience to really go all the way. So only in our portfolio, companies like Penny Lane out of France, which is an AI accounting platform, this team sold a company for $100 million right out of college, and now Penny Lane is their life's work. They want to go at this for the next decades. And that is how long it takes to build these companies, whether you want to say $100 billion or $500 billion, these journeys take decades. So I think this founder profile is very well suited for those, for going all the way. And then secondly, it's the founders that have learned in a different company. So we're seeing great teams coming out of Revolut or Deliveroo or any of these companies that have been around for a decade already, have scaled, and where employees learn a lot on the job, but they have bigger dreams and ambitions, and they go off and build their own companies. So those, only now are we seeing more and more of these founder profiles in Europe, and I think this is an incredible sign for the future. So, we can look at outputs and we can compare ourselves to the US, and we are not going to like the numbers that we're going to see. I'll tell you, I agree with that. But we can look at inputs, we can look at the quality of the founders that we meet in our jobs every day, and I feel pretty good.
Okay, so the inputs are there. There's the multiplier effect of that scar tissue and those companies turning out that talent that's had that experience. Are there any? What are the missing ingredients then? What accelerates the pace and scale of some of the companies that sit in your portfolio?
So I think there are a few things that are not in our control, and there are a few things that are in our control. One of the issues with starting in Europe, no matter what, it's a very fragmented market. So companies have to start in one country and then go language by language, go to France, go to Germany, and it's not always as simple as trying to sell exactly the same product. Each home market is obviously smaller than the US. So one thing that many companies, not all of them, but many companies that have the level of ambition that Sequoia has, look at the US relatively early on. I think the nice thing is that we have a lot of tech and engineering talent in Europe, and these companies can attract some of the best. There is a scarcity value for these really great startups in Europe, so they can attract some of the best from a tech perspective here, and they can relatively quickly look at the US as a go-to-market muscle. For many reasons, I'm happy to go deeper into that if that's helpful.
Well, on that, how much of a priority do you put on that go-to-market strategy involving the US when you meet with your founders, when you back these companies?
I think it's important. I also think you have to be ready. You have to know what you're doing. You have to have product market fit. And doing 1,000 things at once is also not a recipe for success. But what's nice about the US is that it's one single market that helps a lot. And the other one is, I think Brent actually talked about this, and he was absolutely right. It's just the customers, the speed at which customers move and the speed at which customers buy is just different from Europe. So these these companies can get sales cycles to become much shorter in the US than in Europe. You know, one company that we work with, actually the founder maybe here somewhere, in robotics out of Germany, Robco, they recently expanded to the US, and the traction and the size of the contracts and how fast the customers are moving is really, really impressive. And we're seeing that really across the board in our portfolio.
So there's the speed amongst those US customers in terms of adoption and signing off on contracts.
Yes, absolutely.
Is there the speed amongst the European companies building for the US market to iterate and make sure they can deliver? Are we seeing that pace that is needed here in Europe?
Help me understand the question.
Just in terms of the speed of product build out and then shipping, are we the right momentum? Are you seeing the right amount of momentum?
Absolutely, absolutely. I always like to talk about speed of execution as the #1 ingredient for success and #1 indicator of potential future success of startups in the early days. And you don't always have to get it right, but if you move quickly, you know, you can learn, make mistakes, learn from those mistakes, and just get better and better. And absolutely, I think it's easier to do that with customers in the US, in many cases, not all of them.
And we were talking about talent, and Brent was touching on this as well, in terms of work ethic. Some would say maybe this is a stereotype, this is something that those in the US might focus in on. Is the work ethic here in Europe, in the UK, to be able to put in the hours? What do founders say about their teams and the commitment to work through the hours to deliver?
Yeah, I'll say that probably AI has reignited this feeling that we have to move quickly and we have to work fast because things are work hard because things are moving so fast. So we are seeing founders going, I don't want to say going back, I don't know that it ever fully went away, but really going back to the roots of what it's like to build a startup. And let's be honest, it's not easy. If it was easy, everyone would do it. It takes sacrifices, especially in the first few years. It's, you know, it's days in the office, it's hours in meetings and in front of laptops. It's very, very intense. There are absolutely people in Europe who have the right work ethic to join startups. I think the nice thing about the US is that the vast majority of those people are concentrated in one place, in the Valley, whereas Europe is just much more fragmented. I think my friend Matt Miller actually talked about that before. Europe is just a lot more fragmented, so it becomes more difficult to access this talent and find this talent if you have to go to Paris, and you have to go to Munich and Berlin, and that's the advantage of the Valley. But again, I also think that comes with a lot of authenticity for our ecosystem, the fact that we are distributed and varied, and there's some local culture to each startup.
And I touched on some of the names of some of your portfolio companies, some of your investments, quite diverse. As you look across different segments and sectors, where are you most excited about in terms of where Europe in particular can lead?
Great question. It is diverse because we invest in people, not necessarily in sectors. And it's, we were actually having this conversation, we were looking at some of our funds and at the percentage that we invested in different areas. And then we thought, actually, this doesn't even matter that much because we don't invest top-down, we invest bottom-up. We meet an amazing founder with a great story, and we go on that journey with that founder. In many areas, we will have a thesis on the space, but hey, not in all of them. Sometimes it happens that you meet a founder with an idea that seems crazy, and those are some of the best ones, and you go and educate yourself. So I'll start by saying that's how we think about investing, much more people-driven than sector-driven. That said, AI is really pushing a renaissance across many sectors, not just, you know, we say AI and we think labs, we think AI application companies, and those are great businesses, and we're seeing on the application side, we are seeing great companies in Europe as well, like 11 Labs, we're fortunate to work with them, companies like Synthesia and many others. But at the same time, it's also reigniting a renaissance across robotics. And Europe has a long history in robotics. We have some of the best universities here with TUM in Munich and ETH in Zurich. So we're seeing really interesting companies in this space. And then, of course, around defense. It's, with defense, there are other reasons why it's becoming much more top of mind, obviously, but also the fact that the technology has changed. So, so what can be built in this area is also different than what was built 10 years ago.
And just drilling down a bit on robotics, given that you invested in UiPath, is that a vision of the hardware and the software? Is that an AI embedded robotic story that Europe can excel at? How do you see the robotics piece playing out?
So UiPath is a software company.
Yes.
With robotics, of course, it's, robotics probably you can split it in three components. You have hardware, you have software, and absolutely you have AI. And what's happening, we think that's actually the next frontier in AI. What's happening around autonomy for embodied AI is really, really impressive. And, some of it is funny YouTube videos, but a lot of it is very real. I can't tell you if it's going to be 2 years or 10 years until these robots can do more and can be more and more autonomous, but I would say, I'm pretty sure it's coming. And again, I do think Europe is well positioned for that. The other reason why Europe is well positioned for that is that companies here will just have to buy robotics and automate given labor shortages and given our population dynamics. Young people don't want to work on a factory floor. They'd rather work on Uber or Deliveroo. So I think some of these companies, so the technology is advancing rapidly, but also these companies, although you may think they're more traditional and they may not move as fast when it comes to technology, in this particular case, given labor shortages, I think they have to. So that's an interesting area. I forgot to mention, I think Europe is just great in fintech. We've always been great in fintech. Regulation has been friendly. It's created a very strong ecosystem of talent for the next fintech companies. And
sorry, you said the regulation has been friendly?
On the fintech side, I think in Europe, actually, we've allowed companies to grow and flourish and get licenses more so than in other parts of the world. I would argue that, Europe, we say, hey, Europe is earlier than the US. I would argue that Europe is really punching above its weight and even a leader in fintech. I mean, look at companies like Revolut. We're invested in Trade Republic out of Germany, incredible business. Companies like Monzo and many, many others. Klarna, obviously, I should mention, since we've been partners with them for 15 years and they recently went public. So I think fintech, Europe is a great place to build in fintech. And we're seeing very interesting things unlocked by stablecoins. And I don't actually spend that much time in crypto myself, but this particular use case is such a real-world use case. And we have companies like Dollar App or Aspora that are taking this technology and just offering amazing propositions for consumers and growing very fast.
So is there a potential multiplier effect then with the success of the Klarnas, the Monzos,
Yes.
the Revoluts?
I think, honestly, if you're a founder starting a company today and you could start in the US or you could start in Europe, in fintech, hand on heart, I would say build in Europe, yes.
What does AI do to fintech?
Ooh, that is a good question. Well, AI definitely will help you run your business in a much more efficient way, right? A lot of these processes are relatively manual. There's a lot of data around compliance, back office, customer support. So I suspect that you can build these very large companies in a much more efficient way with much smaller teams.
And you touched on defense, and obviously in recent weeks we've seen the kind of imperative to fill the gaps in our own defensive capabilities, whether that's the incursions into NATO airspace or drones or MiG aircraft from Russia. And there has been a lot of money piling into defense. If you're a founder out there looking to get into the defense space, given how many drone makers, for example, we've seen, the proliferation there, what would your advice be to a founder who maybe has experience in the military or in the intelligence services who's looking possibly to have an impact there?
Yes, well, if you want to join defense, you should join Stark in Germany, which is a company we're very excited about. I'm being a bit, I'm half joking, half not. We think it's a great business.
Just tell us what does Stark do?
Stark is a drone and maritime and a provider of many other products in defense, and it's a company that's about 1.5-year-old and has incredible talent and a lot of traction. So we're very excited about this business. We've been their partners really from the early days. But going back to your original question, defense in Europe is, I think the tailwinds are as strong as in the US or actually even stronger. If you look at our investment in defense, really we've been underinvesting since the end of the Cold War everywhere in Europe. And given everything that's happening in the world, I don't think we have to go into politics, but given everything that's happening in terms of dynamics with the US, obviously what's happening in Ukraine, governments have woken up and have realized, hey, we have to stand on our own 2 feet. We need to be independent from this perspective. We need to have access to great technology, and it has to be local great technology because we do not want to take any risks. So I think governments today are very, very interested in supporting local startups, local businesses, and helping them become future defense primes. Because obviously there have not been new primes in a while, for good reason. It's very difficult to sell to these governments typically, but we're seeing that completely flip today. Sales cycles are actually as short as enterprises sometimes, and I think the opportunity is now.
And we've talked, and it's been brought up on a number of panels, the culture across the ecosystem in terms of European tech, and the celebration of success. And also, frankly, wealth creation, because founders will come in, they'll put in 17-hour days for years, and then they build their product, and they're successful, and they're mission-driven. But of course, there's a financial dividend for that. But do we live in a culture that is celebratory of that?
I think that's such a good question. I think the US is really good about this. In the US, the story of the self-made person who built their own business, who owned their own destiny and did something really special, that story really resonates. It's the American dream, right? It's a big part of the culture. And I don't know that the British dream or the French dream or that the German dream is quite the same yet. I think celebrating success and celebrating entrepreneurship is really important for the ecosystem to get to this point where we have multiple $100 billion companies or $1 trillion companies, as you rightly said. Obviously, at some point we see these companies going public and we see the success much later on. But it's always really difficult and it takes a lot of sacrifice to get there. And those are things that people don't see because obviously they're behind the scenes. So yeah, I think that just culturally appreciating, encouraging, and being happy for other people who do really, really well, I think this is great.
And last one, a message for any founders out there in the year of 2025. What would be a key takeaway for you?
Go solve a hard problem. I think there are a lot of companies that are doing very well out there. There's clearly an opportunity to build in Europe. But if you want to build something durable and something that has the chance to withstand the test of time and will be around and thriving for the next 2 decades, I think you have to go and solve a hard problem. And that, again, takes time. Have patience, have resilience, and hopefully good things will happen.
Okay, solve a hard problem, celebrate success, robotics, fintech, AI, easily getting to $100 billion valuation companies. That is the prospect. Luciana, thank you so much, partner at Sequoia.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So, it's almost the end, and what a better way to end this session about Europe with an Italian success story. He founded Evertel and Bending Spoon, now one of Europe's most valuable tech company with hundreds of millions of downloads. I'm very happy to welcome on stage Luca Ferrari and Davide Dattoli.
Double pressure this stage. Welcome, Luca. So, bending spoons. Everyone is talking today in particular, but we are not talking about that. Today is potentially the first decacorn in Italian history, so not just a unicorn, but 10 times a unicorn. When you were starting bending spoons, you're already dreaming for this goal, or what was the dream at that period?
Much bigger, actually. When we started, on a high level, the idea was to build the most successful company of all time, which we knew would never happen, to be clear, but that was the scale of our ambition. So relative to that ambition, we are still very, very small. Again, it doesn't mean I thought we would be here necessarily, but we didn't want to limit the scale of what we were going to build necessarily. So, just go big.
So we'll come back to bending spoons later on, but let's start from before. You were already founding another company, Evertail, in Denmark. Very similar team. Most of the people are also the founding team today of Bending Spoons. What it make not successful in that case, and what makes successful this case, and why coming out of a failure help you to build a success?
Well, luck plays a big role in life in general, I think.
So Milan way better than Copenhagen.
I think Italy was quite helpful for a bunch of reasons, primarily that we found a lot of talented, passionate people wanted to be part of this project. At the time, especially, there was a bigger gap between the talent available and the opportunities to do something truly challenging, ambitious, interesting. And so I think that moving the company here was a good decision, and a decision we made on purpose. It wasn't out of luck, that one, at least. And the other reason why we moved the company to Italy was that we wanted to prove that you can build a global juggernaut, a super successful, dominant company from unlikely places as well. Not that Denmark has a lot of gigantic corporations, but relative to the size, it's a very successful economy, I think. Italy, but I could say the same thing of Greece, Portugal, France, different levels, but I think none of these countries has lived up to its potential relative to the talent it has. And so we figured if we fail, whether we fail in Denmark or in Italy or anywhere, nobody will care. It doesn't matter. But if we do succeed, maybe the impact we can have is greater if we do it from these other places. And so we moved the company and haven't looked back. It's been great. I mean, now it's an international company. We have 1,000 people in 20 countries, but you got to start somewhere, and I think starting here was a good idea.
But let's come back to Evertail, and why at one point you decide it was not anymore the right choice, and why today you're double down on Bending Spoons even more, and the potential is 100 times higher?
Well, it wasn't really our choice to shut down Evertail. I wish we made that decision, because I think that would sound a lot smarter, but the truth is, so we raised €1 million. We were burning cash. We never generated any significant revenues. And at some point, we were expecting to receive, I think, about 250,000 euros back from the Danish government through a tax refund program, because the way taxes worked, at least at the time, you paid in advance and then you got some tax returns. And then the government emailed us and told us that because of certain administrative issues, they were postponing the payment by, I think, 6 months. And so we found ourselves with no money. We had, we were tight on budget, and we essentially had to shut it down because we had no money left. So we found we had about 40,000 euros, barely enough to quickly liquidate, and that was the seed capital for Bending Spoons, which we started immediately afterward. But I think it was good that we shut down Evertail. It was a failure, but sometimes when it's your baby, it's difficult to acknowledge it and act accordingly.
Let's arrive to today, Bending Spoons. Today, company valuation is near to 10 billion. You have hundreds of millions of downloads, 1,000 people or more. But all this story, I think everyone knows Bending Spoons, but can we go a little bit inside some of the numbers, the main KPI, I can call it, and the fact that somehow, if it was fully bootstrapped, the first real increase of capital, I think, arrives at more than 1 billion or near to that. From zero to, you can say, the amount of revenue and EBITDA that you have today you have reached. When is the right choice to raise capital as increase of capital, and when you are avoiding, and why is better to avoid?
So I think the downloads is not a great metric for us. It's a bit of a vanity metric. Not all downloads are created equal. Also, these days, I would say probably 60 or even 65% of our customers and revenue are not mobile. But regardless, you were asking some P&L KPIs. So this year, we should be at about $1.25 billion in revenue, about $700 million in adjusted EBITDA. 300 million monthly active users, 11 million customers. So we've grown a lot from zero, which is where we started.
As everyone.
Exactly. You get there in steps, one step at a time. And yes, we raised equity for the first time in 2022. I'd say probably in aggregate dilution from capital increases has been about 10% through our history, so not a lot. We have diluted more, but because of secondary transactions and all of our team members investing in the company, which we allow happily. I think there is a kind of a general answer as to should you raise, should you not, that equity. Financing is a tool, a variable in the equation, and you should pick whatever option is optimal relative to your objectives and boundary conditions. So in our case, we were profitable from early on, from the beginning really almost. We were confident in what we were doing, and equity investors were not confident in what we were doing. So equity would be incredibly expensive because the valuation would be low relative to the value we assigned. Equity tends to be more expensive to start with. Plus, if you don't think you're being valued fairly, it's even more expensive. Debt is cheaper. Interestingly, sometimes we think about banks as conservative and they don't understand. Well, actually, banks understood vending spoons before equity investors did. And so we started raising that in 2017, I think, give or take. And it's been great because, again, we were profitable, so we could raise it. If your startup or a company isn't profitable, that is really not an option. I mean, there are some venture debt products where you could potentially, but let's say on first approximation, it's not an option. But if you're profitable, you believe you're only going to go up or at least stay flat, that tends to be a cheaper way of financing the project. So I'd say I would default to that as long as I raise at prudent levels and then use equity only as necessary to do more further, making sure that the incremental returns are higher than the cost of the equity I'm raising, or else I'm better off not raising it. But there's nothing bad about raising equity. Companies of incredible magnitude and success have been built raising tons of equity. Tesla used plenty of capital for decades, literally, and it's one of the most inspiring, successful companies of all time, if you ask me. So that works perfectly well if your model is optimized with equity.
But let me underline, for sure, the risk that new capital increase is becoming a vanity matrix is something that between startups is very common to say, if we are not raising, somehow it's not cool. So let's just announce the new round and let's not focus on building a BDA, and how you have balanced the growth.
If I can interject, I've noticed that the better the company, the less that phenomenon is real. Because if you really believe what you're building as legs, the fundamentals are right, it can go places. Every time you raise equity, it'll be like being stabbed in the heart. It should be really painful. If you seek to raise as much as possible, it means probably you're not so confident that you can raise more at better valuations 5 years from now. You want to seize the moment. There's nothing immoral about it, but I'm always a little bit skeptical when people are so eager to raise as much as possible, as quickly as possible.
Fully agree with what you just said. Let's come back to another KPI that I think is very important in vending spoons. That is the number of applications. You receive around 150,000 applications to work for vending spoons. Sorry, maybe way more, so please give me an update number.
700,000 this year.
700,000. I was making a big mistake. And you're attracting people from all over the world that want to come to work for an Italian company. This is something when we're talking about international ecosystem, a lot of time is, yes, but where is Italy in the global landscape, no? How you have been able to attract 750,000 people that from all over the world want to apply to work for you?
Well, first, you get there in steps. Like I said before, we probably had 10 applications the first year. I think you should think about the jobs you offer as a product. Possibly your most important product, I don't know. It's a close tie with the customer-facing product. And if you look at it through that lens, it's a lot easier to to be successful at recruiting. Because all of a sudden you stop thinking that people should be wanting to work with you, and you try to make it an appealing proposition. So start thinking about, is this a great culture? Are the opportunities exciting? Is compensation highly competitive? Career progression. It's easy to empathize. Like, stand in the shoes of people looking for a job. What would they look for? Try to be intellectually honest about it. It's not big secret. It's always the same 4 or 5 things, depending on the individual. Some people are more mission-driven. Some people are more money-driven. Some people are more career-driven. Some people want to work with incredible colleagues on challenging things. Choose your customers in a way. Be excellent at a couple of those things. Flexibility. You could be a company where people don't work a lot.
It's a proposition.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So just know who you want to be excellent at a couple of things, at the best you can be. Send a clear message out there, and then keep improving and iterating. And naturally, then there's so much you can do. The more successful the business is, the easier it is to attract people. If your strategy is super efficient at creating value, you can pay more because the value of an incremental man-hour invested is greater, and so you can be. So you can't attract the same number of people, the same quality of people with any business, but you can get the most out of whatever you're building if you just focus on it from this perspective, I think.
Luca, today you are receiving 750,000 applications, but when you start, how you start? You were telling me, I think, this anecdote some weeks ago in a project that we'll announce later, how you attract the first 10 people and how you were able, because I think we have many, many founders in this room today, and somehow the dream is arriving to 750,000, but how you attract the first few?
We just sought out the contact details of some of the best graduates in Italy at the time, and I just started calling them. I pestered them until a handful agreed to so I would shut up. They agreed to join. And then over time, it only gets easier, basically. So, but as a founder or anyone who's trying to get something done that's challenging, perseverance, a bit of planning goes a long way. I still remember, actually, that so we had already decided to move the company to Italy because we started in Denmark. We moved it there about a year into the project. So we started hiring. We're looking to hire 2 or 3 people. And I was still in Copenhagen, looking to move to Italy like a month later. And I had sent so many emails and trying to contact people. It was in the evening. I was running in Copenhagen. It was pretty cold. Copenhagen is pretty cold in general. I think this was probably the fall of 2013. And I was running. It was pretty chill. And finally, one of these people calls me back. And I remember I picked up and I spent like 1 hour on the phone with this person, like shivering. And then I got this massive flu out of it. But that person ultimately joined and was an important contributor. So just to say, you really need to want it badly and put in the work that's necessary to make it happen. And again, it's not a guarantee. Nothing in life is, but you improve your odds.
But I remember that you said to me that you were calling like 400 candidates one by one yourself to try to say, taking a list of people who take a degree in some of a good university and calling back one by one.
And each was special.
Obviously. So you're also angel investors. You have part of Italian Fund España, you're part of many projects. How, if you are suggesting to a young talent who want to build an AI company today, starting from Italy, what should we start and how?
Yeah, I don't do a lot of angel investment at all, actually. But I've done a few investments. I don't think I've ever found a company that was successful and where let's say the original vision or strategy was suggested by someone. You need an insight and or a lot of passion and or a ton of very specific competence in that area to have a really good shot at building a successful company. And so I'm very unlikely to be able to provide that to anyone. Any major insight we have on AI, we're trying to make the best of it at Bending Spoons. That's ultimately my mandate, is to try to help the company do as well as possible. So I don't think I can answer this question in a useful way for people. But try to be specific. Decide specifically what you want to do. Then you can change that if it doesn't work, but try not to go after vague things. I always recommend starting from the end. What's your goal? What you want to achieve? Not just in business, again, anything in life, anything. And then move backward. Try to establish the most accurate model of reality you can. A bit like you do in physics, gravity, electromagnetism, and it doesn't have to be formulas, but principles that explain the things around you, and then seek the truth as much as possible. You probe reality as you live your life, and every time something happens that's not explained well by your model, you question the model and you try to make it better. Iterate on that, and over time you'll be much better at making decisions and getting to where you want to go. And then I'd say, last but not least, focus as much as possible on the inputs rather than the outputs. So with inputs, I mean, imagine life as this big messy machine, your objective on the other side, and there are certain things you can feed the machine, or levers you can pull, knobs you can turn, fuel you can pour into it. Not everything is under your control. Hope is not a strategy, so just focus on what you can do, which is coming up with ideas, hiring and coaching people, working hard, building a product. Is really try to focus on what you can control. Be a bit fatalistic. I think it helps to make it a bit more bearable emotionally, and then once you do your best, you live with the results.
I was interviewing you a few weeks ago for a project that we are very happy to announce today here on the stage, that is a startup school. Why? Because I think from this conversation what really come out is that we are talking a lot about how to make company, in particular in US. A lot is talking, and all the culture on how to make a startup is coming out of US, but making it in Italy, in Europe, is way different. It's very different to understand how to make a company here. The hiring is different, the fundraising is different. Everyone has his own story, and I think this is something very important. But at the end, listening stories, but is way more to you, is something that helps you to understand how to get from 0 to 1. But at the end, for a founder, is one of the most difficult. I have an idea, I see a potential, but how I transform into a reality. And so at Talent Garden, together with Italian Founders Fund, with some partner, we have decided to build this AI startup school, and we have a small video that we can launch now to present and to try to tell how to make a company in Italy, and try to interview who has done in Italy in the last years. Because I think that the real difficulty is understanding from Luca, from founder of WeRoad, of Serenis, of different Uno Bravo and many others, how to really make today happen to make a company in Italy. I don't know if we have the video. Maybe. So Visit is online from now with the interview with 20 of the most successful Italian founders, directly on the Talent Garden website. But coming back to you, Luca, one last point. You were ending before saying it's understanding the sector, it's putting a lot of passion into it, really try to study the sector, but about the hard work that you were finalizing before. How many hours a week are you working currently? This is something where Christina maybe is better, but she's not listening, your wife now. But what does it mean to make a company like Bending Spoons? Because I think it's cool to be a decacorn, it's cool, but it's a lot of hard work. So I think it's, and what is your trick outside the amount of time, but is not the only one, but which is the trick or something that helps you to make and to be productive?
Yeah, I get asked all the time for some reason. I work pretty much almost all the time. I'm not sleeping. I'm probably working, I don't know, like 70 plus hours, 364 days a year. I don't know anybody who's built a really large, successful company who doesn't work somewhat this hard. Some people work harder, some people work a little bit less hard, but essentially, the world is incredibly competitive. And so it's just unrealistic to expect you be able to do something so unlikely to start with by also trying less hard than some people out there will be willing to try. So not surprisingly, most people behind successful projects, but also in academia, not just in sports, if you ask them, they'll tell you probably something along the lines of what I'm telling you. And so if you want it really badly, you're willing to make the huge sacrifices. This is roughly what to expect, as far as I can tell. Now, again, don't do it if you want it not so much that this scares you, particularly because it's not even guaranteed. A lot of people probably would say, okay, I would potentially do that for 12, 15 years if then I knew for sure I get there. Maybe some people would do that, but you only have maybe a 1% chance. So it has to be something you do for other reasons, not for the decacorn or whatever. You do it primarily because it's an incredible way of learning, challenging yourself and being better, stronger, because you think if you do succeed, there's a ton of value in succeeding beyond the money, which is, to be clear, it's a good thing, but I don't think it's enough to sacrifice so much of your own life to go after something. It would be pretty stupid to do, if you ask me. Yeah, so just be ready to sacrifice, and if you care about the project enough, then all in all, it'll be worth it. In fact, I don't think, I've never in more than a decade ever really considered not doing this, even though it's a lot of days it's painful, but I want it so much that ultimately I don't have a choice. I think if you feel that way, then you probably are the right person to give it a shot.
But it's also about learning. How many books you're reading a year?
As many as I can, maybe 50 or so, yeah.
Thanks, Luca. So a few years ago, you were coming on this stage saying, we just became a unicorn. Today, you are potentially at 10 billion. Let's meet again in very few years for the 100 billion. That is the next step.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. That's the end. Thank you very much for being here today with us. And I hope to see you tomorrow because there's a big lineup coming. Thank you. Bye-bye.